Hey guys, what is up? And welcome to the much delayed and I'm sure much anticipated return episode of the movie discussion Pocket Dimension where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. That's Jay and I'm Cole, and we are back from our pretty much completely unplanned hiatus there throughout most of April and May. That is mostly my fault, guys. Just had some things to do with me being out of town, and then I had a weird thing with my voice where I was concerned that I'd strain my vocal cords, and I was trying to just rest my voice. And then we were all set sort of to come back this week at the normal time. This is not the normal time. This is a Thursday night for Tuesday, and then circumstances came and pushed us back a bit. But we're able to come to you now, thank goodness, and hopefully we will reinstate some normalcy and consistency in the show. But anyway, thanks a lot, guys. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with a little break. Sometimes it helps. That being said, we are still in the midst of a series, so maybe not the best time for a break or hiatus, and we're doing our Masters of Film series, highlighting various of the most renowned directors of all time. I believe our last one, it feels like forever ago now, was Swedish director Ingmar Bergman. And now we're going to move on to a guy that was a big fan of Bergman, and also vice versa. Bergman was a big fan of Tarkovsky. And that's it. This is Soviet filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky. I've got a little Ingmar Bergman quote that says, "Tarkovsky is for me the greatest, the one who invented a new language, true to the nature of film, as it captures life as a reflection, life as a dream." And it's just kind of neat because I remember when we were talking about Bergman before, we were saying about how another great master film that people love so much, we're going to cover in this series, Stanley Kubrick. I talked about how Kubrick loved Bergman, and I'd even a few years ago stumbled upon almost like a fan letter he'd written to him. As I think you pointed out to me, he never knew it would ever be published or people would see it. It's kind of embarrassing, and the whole time he's just sort of gushing, saying how awesome he thinks Bergman is and how much he wishes his movies were half as good and all this stuff. It's just sort of neat seeing sort of the cycle of admiration that these various directors had for each other. And Tarkovsky, being a Soviet director, it's a little tougher given the regime he lived under to be exposed to works from outside the Iron Curtain. But he came in at kind of a good time. Tarkovsky was born in 1932, so he would have been like a kid during World War II, or as it's known in Russia, the Great Patriotic War. And by the time he did some stuff before getting into film. At first, he was going to be an academic, and he went to university. Then he dropped out and wanted to do something, I guess, less academic, and they wound up assigning him out to friggin' Siberia while he was... and it was actually being exposed to, the great vast emptiness and stuff that is Siberia. That was really where he kind of discovered film. It was kind of through nature, which is kind of cool. But he also got tuberculosis. But he did survive it. And then when he came back... he entered the State Institute of Cinematography. And as I said, it was kind of a good time because this was just when Stalin had finally died and Khrushchev was coming in. So Khrushchev was moving very swiftly to dismantle a lot of the brutal, terrible policies of Stalin's government, and also not completely, but open up the Soviet Union a little bit. Before that, it was very closed off from the rest of the world, and I mean, it would still continue to be a bit until the collapse of the Soviet Union, but still, it was really tightened, kind of like what North Korea has been facing for the last couple decades. Anyway, so when he came in, Khrushchev was loosening these things up, so he was able to finally see some Western films and films from other places, including films of Ingmar Bergman and Akira Kurosawa, who we both discussed so far on the show, and they were, big influences on him. So, sorry?
I was going to say, can you imagine the uphill battle he had to, chase his dream of being a filmmaker, and in a place like that, and that kind of environment? It's so.
Well, even once he succeeded, he had films that just never got released. Mm-hmm. For instance, the film that at first we were going to do, and then we switched. That was another difficult. We were going to do his 1975 semi-autobiographical film Mirror, or The Mirror. That film never got released in its time. They just wouldn't release it. That would be the what are they called? I had the name of those people, but anyway, they were like a film board in Russia, and they would just sort of not allow him to the GNP or something like that. Anyway, that was one of the films that they wouldn't allow him to release. That didn't even get released during his lifetime. Like, I don't know how many people got to see it. The Guskino, which was called the State Committee for Cinematography. And as far as this film goes, Stalker, it was released, but they were highly critical of it and upset that it wasn't fast moving enough. And they wanted something that was more of a crowd pleaser. Whereas Tarkovsky, he was more into making art style films for the most part. Certainly, this one and Mirror are great examples of that. In fact, when you're talking to people about an art film, I think Mirror is a really great example, having recently watched it, and I loved it. And we'll touch a little bit on that one too, just because Stalker is in some ways vast and incomprehensible. So Stalker's from a few years later. Mirror's 1975. This is 1979, and it's at least loosely based on a Russian novel or story or something that I hadn't heard of until I was looking into it. That was called I had it, Roadside Picnic. It has at least some very the broad things in common, but as far as like details and stuff, I guess it makes sense of departures from the plot. But both have the whole concept of what the movie revolves around, this large area that's cut off from the rest of the world called the Zone, and that's the crux of the action in this film.
Roadside Picnic, is that brothers?
It's two people. Yeah, I believe it's brothers, Boris and Arkady Strugatsky.
Yeah, I'll let you go with the names. I'm going to have trouble with those pronunciations.
Yeah, so I don't know how close it is to it, but at least has some similarities with some of the major things, specifically the idea of this thing called Zone, which at the very opening of the movie, you get like a little thing on the screen that it talks a little about it. It doesn't say when it first appeared, and it just says that like something happened that people think was maybe an impact from a meteor or something like that. Something that has happened in the Soviet Union. In fact, back in like I think it was 1905 or 1906, there was a massive one in Siberia that just like was devastation for kilometers. But being Siberia, it was very big and open, and nobody was around to actually see it. So that still remains kind of mysterious. So, but the idea was, that now that there's this area where I guess basically the laws of reality as we know it don't apply anymore, and the government was swift to cut it off from everybody and surround it with like a military blockade. And we find out, that they're very, very strict about guarding this, and that they'll even use deadly force to keep it. So they've got the military set up all around the borders to keep citizens from getting in. And what the movie's about is about our main character, who is what's known as a stalker, which is somebody who is a guide that will take people they'll sneak them into the zone to guide them through to a place within only known as the Room, where supposedly you can have like your greatest wish granted or whatever. So that's what's going on here, and it's about him and two of his clients, and there's not any names. So we have the stalker, and then we have the writer and the professor, and it's their journey, physical and metaphysical, as it were.
Yeah, I like that it is kind of vague, or it is really vague. In what it is, there is never really any, definite answer. Is it alien? It's some sort of sentient being, but you don't really know anything else.
Right. You could go like, is it the alien route? Is it an extension of God? Is God doing something here and stuff? So it's open to all sorts of interpretation as far as that goes. And what we get is a world that has been somewhat accustomed to it, in that like they don't even really feel that compelled to discuss it anymore. It's just like, well, it is here, and there's not much sense in trying to figure it out, but let's do what we came to do type thing. Although at first both the writer and the professor are kind of, they aren't forthcoming with their motives for wanting to get in. And our stalker, he always says that his motivation for doing this, he's taken people in before, which is obviously a big risk, not only because of the military presence, but also because the zone itself is said to be very dangerous, and that it's full of like traps and perils that you can't even see. And he says that he's just basically doing it out of altruism, that he just genuinely wants to help people. Or you get the feeling that this guy, the way it opens, like within his shitty apartment place with his wife and kid and stuff, is like he's basically been a failure in life, and this is like one thing he feels that he can actually do, I guess. So it seems to me that's like his more like here's some sort of purpose. But yeah, as the movie goes on and you find out more about these characters, you find out that he feels even like he's a failure at this. The people he's taken through didn't wind up happy and stuff. And he often refers back to a previous stalker called, in English, Porcupine, sometimes Hedgehog, who had taken through some people, including our stalker's own brother, and it led to his brother's death. So obviously he does have some more personal stuff wrapped up with penetrating the mysterious zone.
And the writer is afraid he's going to lose his, I guess, his ability to come up with new ideas.
Right, his inspiration and stuff.
And the professors, you don't really find out until later on what his motivations are.
Yeah. At first, he says he says, well, you know, I do the sciences and stuff like that. He's like, if I can do like a comprehensive, I guess, like study or expose on the zone and what I've observed, I could win like a Nobel Prize for sure. And that's what he says. And they seem to accept this at first, but then you find
makes sense.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the people are in there for their own. And as I said, considering the whole point or the whole reason most people go in the zone is to find the room, like, you even need an extra reason? I mean, all you really have to say is, I want to go to the room, because then, like, I can, you know, will some, you know, great thing to happen for myself, because supposedly that's at least happened to people in the past. It's happened to enough people, or at least people have talked about it enough, that it's a thing now, that people go into it to do this. So, although when he reveals about the brother in Hedgehog is something like, and Porcupine kills himself soon after. And saying, well, how does this work then? If he wound up getting what he wanted, well, why does he kill himself? And we'll come back to that. So again, it's still not exactly a sure thing. And again, people don't know what the room is or how it works, but there's at least a small population or small segment of the population that's willing to, you know, take the risk to go give it a try.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure people would if it was a real thing.
Yeah, for sure.
The whole thing that's discussed is, you know, it may be your unconscious desires that, you know, get fulfilled rather than your conscious desire, which is
right.
Kind of makes you think, you know, it's kind of like a, you know, the genie theory, you know, you may get your wish, but it's not going to be exactly what you wanted, you know?
Yeah. And since we said that, yeah, that is more or less what we've discovered happened sort of to Porcupine, and that he was, what was it? It was like, he made it seem like his wish was for riches. But really what he wanted was for that guy to die. And then he felt so much guilt about it that he took his own life. Damn it. I sneezed before the show, and I was thinking, good. Now I won't sneeze during the show, but
look at inside.
It's just one of those nights. Thank you. But yeah, there's actually, as far as stuff about desires and stuff, and human nature regarding our innermost desires and stuff, that's in line with the only film of Tarkovsky's that I had seen before, like the last week when we decided to do a show on him, which was Solaris, which I don't know if it's his best film or the best film within Russia, but it's his probably most well-known film outside of Russia, the science fiction movie. And that has like some similar themes going on in it too, in that you have this group of astronaut scientists up in like orbit around this strange planet, and you know, there's not much time to get into it, but I'll just say, like, a lot of the stuff that's revealed about them sort of has to do with their own inner desires too, and human nature, blah blah blah. So there's definitely some things in Stalker that are quite in step with Solaris as far as theme goes, presentation being different. But again, there's some similarities too, in that the isolation of the characters, for instance, and stuff like that. I have to say that in talking about a guy like Tarkovsky, he's, you know, all these guys that we're talking about coming from the various countries and stuff, they're all products of, you know, their environment where they came from. And Tarkovsky was very much a Soviet, having grown up in that era. And one of the reasons, but he doesn't necessarily go with the flow as far as that goes, which is one of the reasons, again, why he had so much trouble getting his films approved and released and stuff, was because he didn't just accept the dogma of the time. He often had characters and movies that would like pose questions and things like that, and you know, the censors would quickly, you know, clamp down on him for this. But if you're going to make a movie just physically like Stalker, I mean, the Soviet Union is the perfect place, because they are the best place in the world when it comes to having like big abandoned areas. You know, like this movie was shot in what is now Estonia, which is not part of Russia, but again, during during the time would have been within the large Soviet Union. And what was it? It was like an abandoned like hydroelectric plant or something like that. Yeah, hydropower plants in Estonia. And to this day, even now in 2018, there's just throughout the former Soviet Union and Russia, like there's just tons of like abandoned infrastructure all over the place. So at least he didn't have to. So I mean, considering he's a filmmaker that isn't like allowed to probably leave, like when you're in the Soviet Union, you can't just freely leave. You need permission from the government and stuff like that. Like at least it was very easy to find what he needed because the Soviet Union had all sorts of big empty space and all sorts of abandoned areas that like have like nature sort of reclaiming it, which is basically what we see in the zone. We see like vast empty wilderness and then some places that show like past human occupation but like long abandoned, being overgrown, stuff like that. And yeah, you probably couldn't have a better place for it than where they chose. Getting ahead of ourselves again, I know that Jay and I talked a little about how it was interesting. He died in 1986, so only a few years after this movie. He died of a form of cancer, and some people believe that it was because of the conditions he exposed himself during the filming of this movie that that caused him to die, which seems fair because there were also other people that worked on the movie that died within the next few years too. So there were some fairly toxic locations that they had been in that might have had some.
That's one theory.
Nuclear fallout. Yeah, that's one.
That's one theory, that it was the toxic location. Yeah, the sound designer, Vladimir Sharan, and I believe Tarkovsky's wife passed away as well from the same type of cancer. That, according to the scientists that worked on it, or the doctor that saw him, said that it could not have been produced naturally. So, of course, there's theories that he was poisoned by the KGB.
Yeah,
it's always.
I mean, it's just so hard to know. I mean, a lot of shadowy stuff did happen behind the Iron Curtain in those days. They were certainly they weren't above taking out their own people if somebody they thought stepped out of line. And a filmmaker, is a very kind of, as we said, kind of a risky occupation in that political climate, especially considering some of the statements that his films tended to make. Even though at the same time, you could tell, at least I could tell very much more so not in this, but in Mirror, he was a very patriotic Russian. A lot of Mirror wasn't just about himself, but it also I think if you're a Russian, especially of that generation, there's just a lot to relate to in that movie. And that movie focuses sort of on three kind of main time periods: the pre-war era and like sort of the mid 30s, in which Russia was basically a largely vast kind of agricultural country, and then like the very fast transformation during and after World War II, and the rise of Stalin and all this, and it being whipped into this very industrialized country in a very short time frame. And then there's sort of the post-war years of the 60s and 70s, where some of those plans you see had like kind of by this time fallen apart. And so even back then they were already seeing things like abandoned factories and things that just had to be stopped halfway through and left on, and crumbling infrastructure and stuff like that. So I think Mirror isn't just autobiographical for the individual, but it very much is tied up with Russian identity, specifically from that time. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Who's to say what happened there, but it's unfortunate that he died so young.
Certainly, because, within the next few years, the Soviet Union collapsed, and finally he was starting to get a lot more recognition from within his own country.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, he was well liked in sort of international circles, and when his movies got out, audiences from other countries liked him. And yet within Russia, his work was suppressed to I don't know how much of it actually got out to the general Russian public. So it wasn't even until after his death, really, that he began to get some of the recognition that he certainly deserved. That was when Gorbachev was in power, and he was once again doing sort of what Khrushchev was doing again, trying to open up the country a bit more. And he didn't live to see it, which is a shame, because it seemed to me that while Tarkovsky was a patriotic Russian, he was again probably against a lot of some of those Soviet policies and strong, very rigid communist dogma and stuff. It seems to me that he would have rejoiced at what happened in.
Right.
I mean, rejoiced to a certain extent, because I mean, on one hand, it's still. I'm not saying every Russian was just like, yay, because it was also a blow to the Russian identity, because it felt like a failure. It's like we held on to this system for decades, and now we're kind of admitting it didn't work. So it kind of just depended on where in society you were. Certain classes were like, oh, well, this is kind of a failure. Where other classes, they were just so beaten down and trampled that they're like, hell yes, yeah, it's time for this change. Open it up.
Any kind of change.
Right, exactly. And then, that ripple effect would come through, and in like the other countries as they broke away, like a couple of years later, 93, the split of Slovakia and Czechoslovakia, which, again, very complicated stuff. But anyway. But
this is right around the end of the Cold War as well, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's basically what that's basically what heralded the end, because it kind of proved that like the Soviet system had become so broken by like the last decade or so that the only thing holding it together was the threat of the Cold War. Like, well, we still have that looming threat in the West, America, blah, blah, blah. Once that was finally taken off the board, the dominoes started to fall. It's just like, well, so a very complicated thing that's, it's too bad that Tarkovsky didn't get to live through it, because I mean, I don't want to say for sure, but I think he would have been pleased, and I think he probably could have made some interesting films as a result of it. Again, it wasn't his style to directly base his stuff on history, but he would certainly, take some influence and put it into his work. So it's really too bad that he died when he did.
So early in his career, too. Like, really, he didn't even get to see these films with the appeal they have, today.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the other thing. Like, in comparison to some of the other filmmakers we've talked about and we'll talk about in this series, his body of work is fairly small. We've got sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 7 or 8 feature films. Whereas, somebody like Bergman was making films for decades, or somebody, of course, like Hitchcock and stuff. And so that's another thing too. I mean, on the other hand, it does have sort of a quality over quantity thing. Like, he only made a handful of films, but they're all really strong and good. His longest one from 1966, Andrei Rublev, is the one I really want to see sometime. I'm really interested in it. There's actually a part in Solaris where in the main character's apartment, when we're seeing the post-war period, there's a poster for that movie on the wall, which is kind of cool. But Rublev would have been less arty than I think than the others, and more of a straightforward narrative, in that it's a biopic of a famous Russian painter of the same day from back, I think he was from like the 15th century or something like that. Anyway, I think it's long, but I think it would have been a little bit more of a straightforward affair than, say, Stalker or Mirror. Now, Stalker, not to its credit, but I mean, to be fair, it is a straightforward narrative in that at least it moves, consecutively.
Right.
It doesn't move out of sequence, whereas Mirror jumps all over the place, which makes it difficult, but also I think it's really well done and one of my favorites. I mean, that's always a challenge on the first time. Anytime you're watching a movie for the first time and it does non-sequential storytelling, and it jumps around, it's difficult. But as long as it's a well-made film, you'll see, like in rewatches, that holds together pretty well.
Exactly. So I mean, I love that. I love that technique generally.
Yes. Sometimes it can give scenes a lot more weight if you show them out of order, right? Like that's something that certainly Tarantino took advantage of in some of his films. Like he understood it pretty well.
Well, Tarantino invented it. So.
I'm sure that's what a lot of people think, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people that think he's the one who invented it. I will concede that he was pretty good at it, and he's been pretty good at it, sure. But
that was one of the things that was, I mean, not necessarily off-putting, but a little bit. I don't know. It was one of the reasons I chose Stalker instead, because I didn't think I would have enough time to prepare for Mirror, and that it would need multiple watches to really get a good grasp of it.
I just managed to squeeze in a second watch of Mirror, and it made me really appreciate it more. So I would recommend that to anybody if they're watching it, to maybe within the span of a few days be able to watch it twice, because it really does help and stuff. It's just it's a beautiful movie.
Like an hour, 45 minutes. It's an easy watch.
Yeah, it's about an hour shorter than this movie.
Hmm.
And this movie's interesting because not necessarily a whole lot happens, and yet it takes that long. But that's basically because it's the style that Tarkovsky goes with,
Hmm.
which again, which you see throughout his work. It's in the Solaris and stuff too. We want to talk a little bit about his style. A lot of it was stuff like long, lingering takes, very slow camera movement and stuff. And I was gonna say to you, I was gonna ask you, like, don't you think that like anybody that's say probably about around our age or younger, we'll say, maybe even a little bit older than that, even somebody who is around 40 now, I feel like anybody of around that age and younger has grown up, and if they're not the type of person, if they're just a sort of ordinary person that, like, you watch the movies that come out in the theater nowadays, and then maybe you rent what's popular or stream what's popular or whatever at the time, but you're not the type of person that like makes an effort to go back and watch older stuff. I feel like people of these generations, it's almost like we've been molded to find like the long, slow, lingering takes like jarring. Like they
Yeah,
can't even handle it. Like it seems almost alien
it's
to
a
them.
it's a an attention thing. I feel like we've been programmed to not be able to tolerate that.
Yeah,
At least
because
with
just so
current
many of
film.
the movies, like so many of the movies, the last say 30 years that come out, like the takes are so fast and there's so much movement and stuff, and sometimes that's fine. I'm not going to say it's always terrible or anything like that, but it's just become so pronounced that like I remember this was almost 10 years ago, like 2008. I was reading like an article that said like the average length of a shot in like a movie that comes out nowadays is like 3.5 seconds before it flips to something
Isn't that
else.
crazy? That's mind blowing. Like
Mind
from
blowing.
a filmmaker's perspective, just how I mean the entire movie is done in the editing room.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
this
know. I
film,
mean, imagine like it must be weird being an actor because the movie that you're like acting in, you can't really reconcile it once you see it on the screen with your memory of shooting those
right?
scenes, right? Because
I
you're
mean,
just
how do you put that together in your head when you're shooting it?
hmm
Knowing it's going to be cut that quickly because you take three and a half seconds versus this film was 88 seconds.
yeah.
On average. So
And as I said, a quick cut and stuff and moving around serves its purpose, but nowadays it's just used for everything, right? You have
yeah,
characters sitting in a room having a conversation, and instead of like framing it so that we can just sort of see everybody, and every once in a while maybe give us a close up or something or switching the angle, it's just jumping, 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 and all it is a conversation for God's sakes. And yet
but
now it's sort of like an old fashioned way to like just sort of sit the camera up or pan it in slowly or move it out and just like let the characters interact as if it's like a play or something. Like it's like people can't handle that, that'll turn them off.
you mentioned Tarantino. That's one thing that I immediately noticed when I first started watching his films. In the mid '90s, that he would do that. Leave the camera stationary, have very long scenes, almost too long, from just one single shot, no cut, which
Yeah,
is
he does that
nice.
really well in pretty much
Mhm.
all his movies. I was thinking about The Hateful Eight not too long ago, which isn't great, but it's good, and it very much does that.
The
It holds the camera back and just sort of lets the characters interact without just jumping from face to face and stuff to stuff. And as you said, sometimes it even that he's doing it on purpose to milk it a little bit, and that usually is to build tension because that's what most of his scenes are about. It's about some sort of underlying tension, which I think I've said to people before. If you want to see where he got that from, he definitely got that from Once Upon a Time in the
yeah,
West, which is like the earliest I've seen of like a movie doing it to that sort of way. Like, I mean, that was sort of the conventional way at the time, but it had that underlying tension that like, oh, something could like happen any second now. Like there could be a shootout or whatever. It's done so well in that, and I'm almost positive that's the main film that inspired to do that.
well, I immediately thought of the opening scene in *Inglorious Bastards* when
He's at the French house.
yeah, when he's they're just having the discussion,
Yeah,
which I mean it's like 15 minutes long, but it's my favorite part of the entire movie.
it's really well paced because they talk for at least 5 or 6 minutes just before the camera
Right.
pans down and shows us that there are people down in the
Oh,
basement or whatever, right? Like they don't show it right away, which is great. Like they just sort of let them talk and then they let us in that yes, that he is in fact harboring Jews and stuff. Like so many filmmakers have seen would just want to, they would like open, they would almost like it would open with that, like the camera be on the Jews hiding in the basement, and then they come up and have like that. But this is so much better that they've already been talking for a few minutes, and then they let the audience in on the fact that yes, they are hiding there, and that's really well done. It's great. So yeah, that very much Tarkovsky style is those long lingering shots and slow camera, which while it was definitely more of the norm in his time, it was still to the point that he would even get criticized for it. As I said, that's why that's one of the reasons Stalker was criticized by his own government, because they didn't think it was audience pleasing enough. He had a retort to that, something like the only person he was interested in pleasing was like Ingmar Bergman or something, which is kind of funny. Yeah, see, the average shot length in this film is more than a minute, and there are several shots that lasted more than 4 minutes each.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just feel like contemporary audiences, we've been like conditioned to like hate that, or just like be disturbed by it, to be like, like move, do something, instead of, you know, drinking in the atmosphere or the mood or whatever, like we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just beautiful, the scenery and the whatever they did to the film stock to give it that really odd, it's almost like a shimmer. But I feel like this would look great in like a remastered Blu-ray, which I'm sure is out there somewhere.
Maybe there's a criterion of it. There usually is for those international
I'm
masters.
sure there would be.
Into.
But
yeah, that's true.
Just beautiful.
Yeah, just so people know stylistically, it has something kind of in common with Wizard of Oz, and that when the movie opens and you're outside of the zone, it's not black and white, it's sepia. Everything's sepia toned. And then once you have the three characters crossing over into the zone, suddenly everything becomes in color. But as you said, it's not just in color. You have sort of that shimmery effect in only sometimes. You can't see it all the time, which is really great because it really gives you the idea that they're in a world that's heightened and not normal, and where everything goes. It is kind of funny, though. One of the things, I'm not going to say it's a criticism, but it's kind of odd, like how the characters barely react to when reality more or less warps around them. They don't even say anything. Like sometimes, like they'll just be in an area and suddenly the topography will change completely around them, and they don't even really say anything about it. I mean, yes, I know that's what they were told to expect, but just because you're told that this happens, wouldn't you still be kind of blown away seeing it anyway?
Yeah. In Soviet Russia, it's kind of the what I was thinking the whole time was like, man, these guys, I mean, they're unfazed,
Yeah.
Throw whatever you want at these guys. They'll be all right.
Pretty much.
It's that stereotypical Russian, I guess.
I suppose so. So yeah, so as they sort of journey inwards or whatever you want to towards the room, you find we never really get to understand what the dangers the place poses, because we never. That's something I think is kind of too bad. I mean, I guess it would have been cheap to have a fourth character just so they could kill him off, but at the same time, I would have kind of liked to have seen what can happen to you. We never really do get that. Like, our Stalker's leading them around, and he's like throwing rocks and stuff. He talks about how like the laws of physics don't apply and gravity can go haywire, but we don't actually see any of that happen, which is kind of too bad. As we said, all we see is like some of those changes where suddenly the place they're in becomes sort of another place. But I never felt like they were in peril because I didn't have some trap almost getting them or something like that. Because they talk about traps and stuff, and we just sort of have to go by what the Stalker tells us and believe him.
I feel like doing that would almost be cheap. Because,
as I said, I realized it would have been cheap to have another character just so they could kill him off. But at the same time, I just feel like whatever the threat is, I would have liked to have seen one of the results.
I mean, that's what any other filmmaker would have done right there, though.
For a while, that's why I thought the dog was there.
Right.
I thought like they were going to see something weird happen to the dog.
Yeah, I thought he was going to morph into some sort of creature.
Yeah, it was going to morph some creature or get pulled up into the sky or sink into the ground or just fade out of existence. Yeah. I thought something like that was going to happen because I figured that's kind of the stuff that they're saying could happen, but you never actually really see it. And I mean, again, that's a deliberate choice by the filmmaker. Maybe it is best left to the imagination. I don't know. Like I said, I don't need them to just cheaply kill somebody off. I would have kind of preferred, like I said, to have like some trap kind of almost get them. You can sort of say that happens in the tunnel when the professor gets separated from them, where it goes from like the weird play where water's up to their waist, and all of a sudden they're in this vast room with sand all over the place. Like that seems like something almost got him. He's really shaken by it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It didn't seem dangerous enough for me at the time. But
I think the danger is going to occur now that they're back out of the zone.
sure, because that's something I'll admit I hadn't even given thought to until afterwards. That the movie hits you with at the end. We're doing full spoilers here and stuff. Is after he goes to bed and he's all upset about everything, and Leo, of course, will circle back to what happens in there and stuff. And his wife turns and breaks the fourth wall and addresses the camera, and she talks about how she knew life with him would be difficult and stuff like that, especially him as a stalker. And then she says they say that the strange things happen with their stalker's children, and the movie ends with a shot of his daughter, who apparently has like telekinesis.
I guess we can get to what that means later, but how did you feel about that shot where she broke the fourth wall and talked directly to the camera? Were you okay with that?
You know what? It's funny. Now that like I put the pieces together, the last film we did in this series was Hour of the Wolf,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me thinks if he was trying to do that because he wanted to like had some sort of because it was part of his admiration for Bergman, because Bergman does the same thing in Hour of the Wolf, where you have the wife at the beginning and end of the movie directly talking to the camera and the audience about her husband. And now you have the same thing happening here. So part of me feels like you didn't need it, but I felt like he wanted to do it because of that. Like I can't say that for sure, but I mean it's proven he loved Bergman, so obviously he would have seen that movie. And it just seems so similar that part of me thinks that he did it because he wanted to have sort of like a nod to that movie.
It felt a bit odd to me, but I mean, it does kind of add to, why the stalker is searching for something anyway, because obviously their relationship's not going great. So, it kind of adds to that a little bit as to why he is out there risking his life,
Yeah. But I mean, I feel kind of stupid, like for it not to occur to me that perhaps the fact that he's gone into the zone multiple times would have some sort of effect on him. Like that hadn't even really occurred to me. So it was, kind of a cool little twist or whatever to the fact that he would have a kid that would have like some paranormal abilities. But at the same time, she seems so weird that you part of things like, is that all there is to her, or is she like different from humans, like in the way she thinks and acts too? And you don't get to find out. Again, that's probably on purpose, just so to give us something else to think about as the film ends.
Yeah. And I like that. I like things being left open-ended like that.
Sure.
It does get kind of discouraging sometimes, but in this situation, I did like it.
Yeah. So anyway, as they make their way through, the three characters start to open up to each other a little more and reveal things about themselves. And as we said, the writer had said his original intent was about worrying sort of about stagnating as a writer. At this point, he hadn't really been successful, and he's worried about that. And I can't remember the line anymore. I should have written it down. Where he said something that actually I, as a writer, really relate to, where he just says something about having like almost a pathological need to prove your worth to other people, which I mean, I hate to admit to, but it is kind of one of the things that drives me about wanting to be a writer, is that I feel like it doesn't even ever have to be that great. I just feel like there's the world as we see it, and then there's, the fiction and the stuff that's out there. There's the lexicon, whatever you want to call it. And all I really want to do is contribute. I just want to be able to say that I put something out there, and so I kind of really relate to that line where he says something like that about something about wanting to show that you're worth something to other people. And I'll admit, at least for me, I can't speak for all writers, but I feel, that resonated with me at least. I do feel like that is a big part of my motivation for trying to be a writer. As much as I want to go through life and say what other people think of me doesn't matter, well, it doesn't in most personal senses, but it does to that. I wish people could see me as somebody that can create, I guess, is kind of what it is. And so that line did strike a chord with me, which I thought was interesting.
You want to leave something after you're gone. You want your work to, live on, right?
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of the way I would imagine it.
Again, like it doesn't have to be any sort of great thing that everybody thinks is amazing, but something with some staying power that at least some people can enjoy and some people can, say.
Well, that wouldn't hurt, right?
Of course it wouldn't. Yeah, that's for sure. And so there's a thing about the professor having a backpack.
Yeah.
And at one point, he, basically risks his life in going back because he left it to go back for it. The stalker's yelling after him how dangerous and crazy that is. You can't go back. And because one of the things is you can't do straight lines here. Because it's like, you find out even when at the beginning, they're actually not even that far from the room. He said, well, the room is probably only about 200 meters from here if you go in a straight line. But there's no going in straight lines here. So they have to take a weird circuitous route, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so he does manage to get back to the backpack, and then eventually find out the reason he has is because he's carrying a bomb. Because his whole story about wanting to, get the Nobel Peace Prize and get fame and stuff for talking about it is just a cover, and he actually feels like the room is a bad thing for humanity, and that the best thing to do is destroy it. But eventually, he decides against that, takes the bomb apart. But he's willing to obviously die for this because he would have to blow himself up with it.
I totally understand that. I mean, that aspect makes sense. Because whenever you have something like that, there's always someone that wants to use it for evil.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks it's only a matter of time before, somebody uses it for something really bad and stuff like that. And right after that, I know we're jumping around stuff, is the weird pivotal moment where we're waiting the whole movie to see the room. We don't see it. They just all be like, yeah, we're better off not going. And so they leave, which is pretty cool. I'll admit it's kind of a ballsy move to have the characters do that. It's like the characters are on the quest, they're on the Grail quest, and at the last minute they don't go for the Grail.
Like, no, it's right there, but let's not.
Yeah, I think we're better off without it. So it's kind of a neat sort of inversion or whatever of that kind of trope. This whole heroes questing for some sort of divine item or source or whatever, which is pretty cool because it's a very it's not exactly, I wouldn't call it, it's not exactly an anticlimax. Well, yeah, I guess it is, but it's a good one. And the dog comes out with them, which is kind of cool. You never even see the dog with them. You just see the dog sort of running around in the area that they're in. And then eventually you find out when it pans back to the bar that they've all come back, that the dog's with them. And the stalker's just like, yeah, another dog. Okay, I'll take this dog. Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I think I've seen too many horror movies. I've been programmed to think that dog's going to turn into some sort of it-like creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we said before, like I guess sort of the main reason they decide not to go forward with it is that epiphany about the idea that like the fact that the room will grant you your innermost desire, not necessarily what you think you want, that maybe that's just too risky and not worth doing, and that is probably what, and they think that is probably why Porcupine / Hedgehog wound up killing himself, and that it granted him his true desire, which really upset him and disturbed him and stuff. So that's why and that it fulfilled his secret desire for wealth instead of helping his brother, so he kills himself. So then they say, it's too dangerous if you're seeking it out, if you have sort of like these negative thoughts or feelings inside you. And so then they just sort of have a last shot where they're just sitting there, and some rain comes in through the ceiling of whatever busted up factory building they're in at this time. And then it jumps back to being in the bar and we're back in the world of the drab world of sepia tones.
It did jump back to sepia. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you. I'd forgotten.
Yeah. Everything outside the zone is sepia toned.
As I know, when it showed the dog drinking, I guess milk.
Yeah.
Whatever that was, man, that was really odd looking. So that was sepia toned as well.
Yeah. Actually, there is one sequence in the film that I don't think is in the zone that's in color, and that's of the girl like walking through a field.
Mm-hmm.
The first time we see the daughter, I was confused too because at first I thought he only had the son. You see the son at the start, and you see the daughter at the end. So I didn't know he had another kid. But,
I thought maybe he was trying to tell us something with the use of color there.
Yeah, he must have been.
So. Or else why would he have done it?
Yeah. Their couples, their child's name is Martiska, something like that.
Yeah.
And then she, the movie ends with a shot of her and reciting the poem, although it's inner monologue. She's just sitting there and we just hear it. So it's not her actually reading the poem. But anyway, we're reading the poem and stuff, and which fair enough, I guess. Mirror is full of poetry because that's the point. Because the main character in Mirror is a poet, so a lot of the scenes have him reading his own poetry over. It's actually pretty good poetry. I enjoyed it.
That's his father, right?
Yeah, it's actually his father doing the voice of the main character in the film. In that film, I don't know if you ever actually see the main character. You always, whenever he's in a scene, it's from his point of view, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I really love Mirror.
It felt like a very personal film to him.
Oh yeah,
and that both his parents are in it, and I think his wife is in it as well. So obviously, it was a kind of a passion project for himself to.
Yeah.
I kind of thought maybe document his father's life. I didn't know. Was it totally fictional or?
Not totally. Again, it's some of it's fictional, some of it's not.
Okay.
There's some things in it, yeah, that are from his own childhood, but there's also some things in there that are from his father's childhood. So it's just sort of a mixture of stuff. Okay. Again, it's such a great film, and it's a deeply personal film, and it didn't even get a release. The film board wouldn't release it, So that sucks.
Yeah. People making the decisions shouldn't have the right to. Yeah, it's like the ones that get to choose whether or not it gets released really don't know anything about film. So
I know.
Seems like that's always how it is.
It's the old, it's the old Soviet world. Censor this, suppress that.
But so the daughter with the glasses, I guess we need to break that down and figure out exactly what's going on there, because whether I thought it was really, I thought it was really cool. I liked it. I don't really know what it means.
I don't know what it means for the future, but they are just sort of confirming that yes, multiple trips to the zone obviously does have an effect on the human being, and that he obviously was doing it even before she was born, and he passed on something that he'd acquired in the zone to her, which just made her have sort of like a little piece of the zone in her, and that now she can also break the laws of physics. I don't know what it means for the future, though, because again, they don't give us an idea of what her personality or anything is like, so I don't know what she's going to do or anything.
So maybe his son is like Magneto.
Yeah, maybe. Obviously, the government of that time would have taken them and made them be like agents.
Yeah, so that's the movie I want to see.
Yeah, that's totally what they would have done. And I mean, again, this was from an era where they were actually on the lookout for that, right? Like there were real like labs, deep, secret labs in Soviet Russia where they were testing like children. Nobody in the world tested for like ESP and telekinesis more than the Russians. They were right into it. They had a whole program set up for it and everything because they were really interested in the possibilities. It was basically a waste of time, but.
And what was the? I'm trying to think of the one that was in the U.S. Oh shoot! It has the name. Damn it!
Yeah, the CIA had a program too.
It's like the MI6 or something like that. It's the something, and then shit. Never mind. I'll think of it later.
Yeah.
Stuff that's kind of swept under the rug now. That didn't ever actually happen.
Yeah.
Where they would do the same thing, testing for ESP, testing for telepathy,
telekinesis.
Yeah, all that good stuff. Which it's all bullshit, right?
As far as I know.
I mean, let's face facts here. There's no scanners running around out there,
I think if there were, we'd know by now.
Yeah.
You think at least one, even if they were like controlled by the government, some scanner, would go off and expose everything. They'd flip out trying to blow up people's heads. Go after an ex-girlfriend or something.
So we've got DARPA, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Right.
What was the project called? Man, it pisses me off. I can't think of it. You would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what it is, but I can't think of the name either. But yeah, it was an official program for at least 4 or 5 years, if not
Yeah,
longer.
but the same way they would just give random drugs to the military, random um, psychotropes and you know various forms of LSD and other things like that.
Yeah. Speaking of which, a few days ago, noted author and journalist Tom Wolfe passed away.
Oh, really?
And he was the guy that had written the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which was always a very popular book about not the government, but just people's own sort of experiments with LSD and acid and stuff like that back in the day, Hell's Angels and hippies and stuff like that. It's a really cool book. I haven't read it in a million years, but it was more his journalism that made him sort of a hero of mine back when I was interested in being serious journal, because he was part of that whole new journalism wave that like Hunter Thompson was a part of and stuff too, that I've always found really interesting. But yeah, he passed away a couple days ago. Great American author, Tom Wolfe. Always in those white suits.
Oh, by the way, it was MK Ultra. Is what I was trying to think of.
Yes, that's right. Hell, they even made a movie about it with Jesse Eisenberg. Remember, it was called American Ultra, about like one of the supposed like Ultra agents, like a sleeper agent, like who just he's like this stoner, and then he like they activate him, and he has no idea what's going on. Like he doesn't have any recollection of his training or anything like that. It's not a bad movie, really.
No, it's really not a bad movie at all.
Jesse
I liked it quite a bit.
And,
is it
what's her name?
Kristen Stewart?
Yeah, Kristen Stewart. Yeah, it's not a bad movie.
I actually don't dislike Kristen Stewart either. I know she gets a bad rap for the Twilight stuff, but she's done some good movies. She's a good actress.
Yeah, she's all right. And I don't dislike her for the personal stuff either, because I mean, yeah, I know that she's like, maybe said some bitchy things or whatever, but no big deal, like nothing terrible. I remember people all flipping out once when she said something about feeling like she'd been raped after like a bunch of people, like I don't know what was, a bunch of paparazzi like blitzkrieged her and stuff like that. And people were like, oh, I was like, come on, she just said like, and sometimes rape is used in that way. Like
maybe bad choice of words.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great choice of words, but I mean, come on.
Well, in this day and age, I feel like or celebrities in particular, their life is under a microscope. I mean, if you put it out there on social media, it's really it's open to anyone attacking you on that level.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, Kristen Stewart's okay.
And Jesse Eisenberg, not so much.
I don't know much about him. He's okay. I mean, I've liked him okay in movies. When people have heard me freak out enough about how I hate him as the Lex Luthor or Alex
man.
Or Lex Luthor's son or whatever they want to call him. I don't care. He's just awful. Just awful, awful. But I don't blame him. He was playing the character they wrote and probably played the way it was. Like it was just terrible past casting.
So he was Lex's son? I mean, did they ever actually they said that?
Yeah, they kind of like backpedaled and said it's Lex Luthor Jr. or whatever it's called. What was he? Who is a real character? I can't remember his name. It's Lex, but it's like Alex or something stupid.
Lex Luthor.
Yeah, something dumb like that. There's some really weird stuff going on with that. Like, I don't know. The only Superman comics I own are the massive. The biggest thing I own is the omnibus of the whole death and return of Superman. It's all of it, so it's massive. And it just like, again, like if you're not the type of person that like read comics, it would just weird you out. And it would obviously they would drop it if they're going to make a movie. Like, let's say they were going to make a movie about Death of Superman, which they kind of did. They did have him fight something called Doomsday and die, and that just proves it. Because I mean, if they're really going to do it. At the time of the death of Superman, you have a guy who is supposed to be Lex Luthor Jr. He's this guy who appears to be in his 30s. He is red. He's got long red hair and a long red beard, and he speaks with an Irish accent. And he's supposed to be like Luthor's like illegitimate son, and now he's head of it. And Lex Luthor at this point is supposed to be dead, and he actually is dating Supergirl at this time, and that's all throughout the thing. What's actually going on, as weird as that even is Lex Luthor. That's Lex Luthor's brain in a clone body, pretending to be his illegitimate son. Right? And that's just business as usual in comics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's funny too because he's speaking with an Irish accent and saying stuff like "Oh, Shemagora" and all the stupid things. It's pretty funny, and it actually is. It is Lex Luthor himself just pretending to be a son that doesn't exist and dating Supergirl. Really funny.
Do you think that's what they were going for in this previous movie?
No, they wouldn't. Whoever they were, they wouldn't even have been aware of that. And if they were going for no, like I said, they're just saying, "Oh, well, this is actually a different sort of Lex Luthor." I don't know, just backpedaling nonsense. Who cares?
Have you seen Justice League yet?
No, I mean I will. It can't be as bad as the other one. I
Ugh.
mean, it's still based on the foundation of the other one, so it's not like it's going to be good. But I mean, I will eventually see it. As we said when we were talking about Waterworld and was looking up the expensive movies, I think it's the third most expensive movie ever made. The day
Justice League?
it was over $300 million.
I guess the reshoots and when you have Superman come back and he has a mustache and you have to hire a team of people to get that mustache out.
Yeah, he should have come back with the mullet like in the comics.
Yeah, I would have liked that.
But speaking of that, did you see Infinity War yet?
Have not. I need to.
I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. I would definitely.
Yeah.
It's hard to say if it lives up to the billing of lead. This is what they've been building for since the start in 2008. 10 years has been leading to this. I mean, I don't know if it can quite deliver on that, but it still is quite good.
I can't believe it's been 10 years.
As I said, it really helps to have seen Thor Ragnarok first because it just puts some things in place for you. It just, for instance, it reminds you that Thor and Hulk have been away from Earth for a while, so they don't know about Civil War and stuff like that. That they've had, yeah, and yeah. It's definitely a good movie though. I certainly enjoyed it. I was going to see Isle of Dogs this week. That kind of got messed up, but maybe I'll still be able to get to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see. I'm gonna go see Infinity War, and then I'm gonna go see Deadpool after the crowds die down a little bit.
Is that coming out this Friday or tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I believe so.
yeah, I'll probably do the same thing. I don't know. It looks good to me. It looks like it's the same. I mean, the first movie was really enjoyable, despite the fact it didn't have a good villain. But this time we've got, well, not exactly a villain, but we've got Cable in it. So to me, this seems like it'll be really good because Cable's a really strong character. It looks like they're doing a pretty good job of him. He's not one of the characters that I hold up really high, so I can be a little looser on him. So like, who is it? It's Josh Brolin.
Josh Brolin, yeah.
Yeah, he seems okay.
Which is interesting.
I mean, basically, the main thing you need to know about Cable, and one of the reasons why he has always been used with Deadpool is because he's a foil. Because he's tough and no nonsense. He's a tough, gruff, by the numbers, no nonsense guy. That's all you need to really know. Like, and Deadpool is 100% about nonsense. So that's why they've always played off each other all these years. And plus, Deadpool's first appearance was in X-Force, in where he was hired to kill Cable. In his first appearance, he wasn't really too jokey. It took a while before they gave him that thing. And that one, he's just an assassin trying to kill him. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not even sure exactly when the switch happened. Because, yeah, the first few, like, he might have made, like, some quips. But, at some point in the 90s, he, transformed into the omnipotent crazy man that we know and love today.
Yeah, I'm kind of afraid they may play that up a little too much in the movies, but
I don't know. It's kind of cool to see. I don't mind. I mean, Deadpool is the second phase of Wolverine in that he's overexposed.
Absolutely.
In the 80s and 90s, there was too much Wolverine. And then at some point in the 2000s, it turned into now there's too much Deadpool. He's constantly in everybody's other titles. Like, he's just all over the place. Like, if I dropped every comic I was reading right now and only collected Deadpool appearances, that would probably still double what I'm taking in a month. Just fucking everywhere, man. And then there's you derivative characters like Gwenpool, for God's sakes, which was based off somebody's freaking cosplay. Because somebody went to a cosplay dressed as Gwenpool, which was basically going to be like if Spider-Gwen, the Gwen Stacy Spider-Girl from another world, if she was like Deadpool. It was a really great costume, and somebody's like, yes, that should be an actual character. So now Gwenpool, she doesn't have any of the Spider-Man stuff, but yeah, the whole idea is she's supposed to be coming from the real world. So she's kind of like omnipotent the way Deadpool is, and the whole idea is she has knowledge of Marvel as their comics, and that's how she's able to go about the Marvel universe. Plus, she doesn't believe she'll actually die. because she knows people come back to life all the time. It's kind of interesting, but I don't know. It's going to be on a new West Coast Avengers team that they're reviving for some goddamn reason.
Yeah, first time hearing about this Gwenpool thing.
I haven't read any of the comics she's in yet, but yeah. But yeah, she's supposed to be a chick from supposedly the real world, but she knows all the Marvel stuff, so she uses that knowledge to do stuff. At first, she was kind of a bad guy. She was like selling like some sort of like killer virus to, I don't know, Hydra or somebody. Then at the last minute, because she just figured it wouldn't do any harm, because if Hydra did try to use it, some hero would stop them. And then she just changed her mind. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting idea. I don't know, but to think that that's where it came from, just somebody's cosplay idea. It's like, yes, that should be an actual character that gets their own series and everything. I don't know.
And you talk about something that I'm out of the loop on is cosplay. I do not get it.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's fine if people want to do that. I just don't. I don't know. I went to a Comic-Con in Pensacola a few months ago, and that's basically all it is now.
Yeah, it's too bad when that kind of overshadows the actual stuff. Like I said, I get it, but at the same time, because I mean, I get it for like the simplest things. We like these characters, so it's fun to dress up as them. It's just that it takes. The only thing I don't get is like how much time and effort it must take.
Sure, and
like I love these characters, and it would be cool to dress up with them, but I don't have the follow through to actually do it. Is me. Like, if somebody wants to give me like a cool costume, I would wear it. I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome, but I'm not actually going to buy or assemble this costume myself. Like when I've only been to, well, not even real cons, but when the hell comes here, but what I do is I dye my hair like pink or something. That's my big contribution. Like I don't deck myself out. I mean, I certainly am, since I am a comic book geek. I certainly see the sexual appeal of cosplay.
Totally.
I love cosplay girls.
Of course, like who doesn't? But I mean, I appreciate that there is a safe space for people to go and do this thing that they really like, and that's cool. Go for it. It's something kind of jarring about seeing like a 7 foot tall black guy in a Sailor Moon costume. It's just.
Well, yeah. To be fair, I haven't really seen that kind of cosplay where people really go against their type. I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should be able to do whatever you want.
That's what I'm saying. Go for it. If you want to do it, go for it.
Yeah.
But it's just something that I'm not.
That would be jarring. Yes, that would be jarring. As I said, like if I was going to do cosplay, yeah, it wouldn't occur to me that I should dress up as something that I couldn't pull off at all.
Yeah.
I would at least try to go for some lithe male character like a Spider-Man or something that I know I can decently pull off. I can even do some cartwheels. If people wanted me to. Well, Spider-Man's doing cartwheels. That's pretty low fare. I'm like, I can't do backflips, okay? It's the best I can do for you.
Well, and another thing, a girl that may be like a solid like 5 in real life would go to one of these shows and put on some sort of skimpy affair, and she's like a 10. Like, I mean, guys love them because it's full of nerds, right?
Yeah, and I don't mind that either, because I mean, it helps people that need to get laid. So I'm all for that too. I mean, I don't want people to get the wrong idea of me, because sometimes I know I probably come off as like superficial and stuff, and talking about like hot people versus ugly people. Fine, I'm just saying everybody deserves to have some attention and sex.
I just feel like some of these girls that may not get a second look otherwise go to these shows and kind of get their ego stroked a little bit, which is cool.
I think that seems like an okay thing. I mean, anything can be unhealthy if you rely on it too much.
Yeah.
Sure, but as long as you don't take it too seriously and don't rely on it too much, to me, I'm pretty sure that's an okay outlet. Yeah. I'm not saying it would be great if somebody just went and like completely hoard themselves out. Yeah. No, that's not healthy. Don't do that. But
that would happen too.
I'm sure. Like when it comes to anything, right? People make bad decisions or overdo it, and that's how it is. But I mean, for the most people, adults that have at least some sense, they can get some enjoyment out of it, and good for them.
Sure. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I just don't have any desire to dress up like anything. I mean, even Halloween, I don't really have the desire anymore. So
yeah,
just, I don't know. Just makes me feel old.
Yeah, I understand.
We got here because of telekinesis.
Yeah, I know. Well, telekinesis always does make you think of comic books and stuff, but also talking just about movies that are current or recent and stuff like that. A movie I saw when I was back in Sydney that had come out in theaters last year that I didn't bother with, that now I wish I had, that I thought was awesome, was War for the Planet of the Apes. You saw that movie, didn't you?
Oh man, I loved it.
I thought it was so great. Like, I was blown
It's,
away by how good it was.
it was one of my favorites of the year. It's that trilogy, man. It's so perfect. It's so well done.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember Dawn too well, but I mostly like Dawn. But this kind of like takes what Dawn did and builds it up even better. Like, it's so good.
You'd never think you would have empathy for those damn apes, but man, they do such a good job. And
Andy
was it Andy
Serkis.
Serkis? Yeah,
Andy Serkis is amazing, man.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are movies with a great example of really good effects. You know, it all looks so good. And I really like the movie because the bad guy, you can really side with him too, because even though he's like horrible and kind of like does monstrous things, you totally understand why he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you'd be like, would I act any different if I was in his place and stuff? So I mean, it really had that going for it too. You know, it was a really great movie.
Is
And
this the Woody Harrelson character?
Yeah, Woody Harrelson, and I hope they can do another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the plan is with that. I don't know if they're actually going to take it into space or I mean, not to space, but take it like to where the the original movie was. Take it
I would really
that
like
far
to
in
see
the
them
future.
do that. To tell you the truth, I would. I think they should. But yeah, I was really blown away by War because I just remember I was home and my parents have some of the movie channels and stuff. So I was looking at stuff that was available on demand, and I was like, oh yeah, this. I was like, I like Dawn. I hadn't seen Dawn since around it came out about 3 or 4 years. And then I watched the movie. I was like, holy shit! I watched it twice while I was home. I really loved it. That was great.
Cool.
Definitely one of the best movies of 2017.
It's
And I felt bad that I didn't even bother with it in theaters. It's not like I went, screw it. I just didn't think about it, really, I guess is what it was.
yeah. My kids and I had watched all the movies, the weekend prior, so we went.
Nice.
We were all ready to go see it. So they
Yeah,
were really into it.
I have a soft spot for the original movies. I mean, as silly and campy as they are, they still have some good things going for them.
Well, I'm sorry, the original. I mean, Rise and
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Dawn.
I'm saying I do like the originals too,
Yeah, I do too.
for all their flaws and stuff. I mean, you have to give the original series a lot of credit in that it was never supposed to be a series, so they did a really good job of kind of on the fly making it into one, because it was just supposed to be a one and done movie. And then they fire off like 4 more, and I'm not saying the quality is as great. No, I mean none of the sequels are as good as the original, but they actually build up a pretty good world and story arc, which I think is pretty impressive. Again, given it was not planned that way. Nowadays when they're making these movies, it's all usually pretty well planned out, especially when you look at like the Marvel stuff and stuff like that. So yeah, I like them a lot. Weird that I don't own them. That was something that you could actually really cheaply own.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my roommate bought, like, this was like more than 10 years ago. My roommate bought like a DVD box set of them, which all the originals, and I mean it was like maybe $30 or something. Just really quite cheap.
I bought the Blu-ray set too. It was really cheap. It was like 20.
Yeah.
And there's some of those I haven't even seen. It's like 10 movies, isn't it? It's quite a few.
It's like 5.
Is it only 5? Okay.
It's Battle for the Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and then there's like Conquest of and Battle for, I believe.
Wow.
War is basically based a lot on Conquest of the Planet of the Apes in a lot of ways. I mean, they're really doing that thing with the Caesar character and stuff. But in a much, much more satisfying fashion. Conquest, even though I haven't seen it in years, I still remember, like, it had a lot of logic problems. Like, it's basically where the apes really finally, it shows the point in history where apes who are at this point becoming more intelligent but are still, like, subservient to humans. It's the point where they finally have, like, their revolution and break out of human control. And, like, because of, like, budget constraints and stuff like that, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just like the humans continue to try to fight them with like small arms fire and stuff. It's like, why would you be doing this? It doesn't make any sense that we would conduct warfare this way. Same thing. You see that in lots of movies though. Like not too long ago, I was watching the Starship Troopers movie. Like the warfare they conduct in those movies makes humans look like retards. There's no reason like why we would if there was actually a force of like these huge, gigantic, very durable bug things. why we would just fight them with a bunch of ground troops
Exactly.
that don't even have like tanks and stuff behind them, or really like again, it's just we keep trying to take things on with small arms fire. Like why? What's even the tactical reason of landing on this place anyway? Carpet bomb the hell out of it. It's not like in real life, in real warfare, where we don't just carpet bomb places, so we're trying not to kill civilians and stuff, which, you know, we've had mixed results with it. But at least you say, you know, we make the effort and stuff. Like in this, you don't have to make the effort. You're not worried. You want to kill everything. So, but anyway, it's just like, well, it wouldn't be much of a movie if we didn't have our mobile infantry going out there. It's just like, but it makes no sense.
Like split in half and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is like human society several centuries in the future, and this is the best we can come up with for warfare. Like, it's kind of sad.
Speaking of that, a friend of mine sent me a video. It's a mock toy commercial for Starship Troopers toys.
That's probably what made me think of it.
Yeah, that was really cool. They'd have like, it was like ground beef, like it was in the toys, and it would get blown up and stuff. It was neat.
Yeah.
You know, kind of in the same tone as the movie itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is, you know, say what you want about the movie. It kind of doesn't hold up, but it has a nice tone to it.
Yeah, and I'll you know admit that I didn't get that when I first watched it. I mean, I was about 14, and everybody in my age group loved it because it was like, at least guys, because just like, yeah, I know it had killing and it had some tits, although not very good tits and stuff like that. But they're like, yeah, everything great. And I remember like I had friends that would talk about like being in the Roughnecks and quoting it and stuff. It wasn't until years later that I realized, you know, how it's more or less a satire and stuff. Especially when I found out about the book, because the book is so different in tone. Because the book is 100% serious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's Heinlein or whatever his name is, who is a really good science fiction writer. And most of the time, this doesn't come across in his writings. But his like crazy right wing militarism is like all like front and center in this book. Like these were things he really believed. Like he believed that like a better society would be where you don't get to vote unless you have served in the military and stuff like that. Like he thought that was true. Just like that whole thing that Michael Ironside's character playing, where he talks about like how the ultimate authority isn't a moral authority, but it's violence. You know, that's the ultimate authority. And in the book, he says something like how the tried and true phrase like violence never solved anything. Not only was it inaccurate, but it was immoral or something like that. That was very much about yeah. So the movie does a good job of sort of lampooning all that. But when I was a kid, I didn't really.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, go Roughnecks. I mean, I didn't really like the movie. I mean, it looked cheap and stupid even to me back then, but it was okay. But yeah, now I can. You know, they made so many like spin-offs and stuff. I never saw any of it. Like some of it was CGI and some of it was live action, but I never saw.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know they did 2 or 3 sequels that aren't that great, but I never saw the other stuff.
Yeah, they did at least 2 or 3 sequels or shows or something that were like animated too.
That sounds cool. I'm gonna need to check that out.
They basically look like Halo.
They
look like Halo.
It launched the career of Casper Van Dien.
Well, what did his career entail after that? Because that's like the only movie. That's like the only movie he's in that I can name.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
His straight-to-video career.
Don't you love how they tease us with Denise Richards, and then instead all we get is like the topless nobody? Like, here's Denise Richards. Oh man, I hear there's nudity. There's nudity in this movie. Oh, it's just this, you know, other chick who's mostly flat.
Is that the redhead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's anything. I mean, she's pretty, she's cute and stuff. I just felt like the movie was like teasing us because it was almost like it was promising us, yeah, you're going to see some naked Denise Richards. But
this was the prime time for Denise Richards too. This was the Wild Things era.
Yeah, Wild Things. She was a Bond girl somehow, inexplicably.
What was her name? Like Dig Eats a Lot or something?
It was Christmas something, like Christmas Jones or something.
Christmas Butthole.
No, like her
really terrible.
Wasn't being normal. But the whole thing was like at the end, he's just like, I thought Christmas only comes once a year and all this bullshit, right?
Yeah, those puns never get old.
Like, it's not insulting to our intelligence that Denise Richards is a Bond girl. Sure, why not? It's insulting to our intelligence that she's a Bond girl who's like a nuclear physicist. That's literally what she was. And I like that movie. That's actually, I think, one of the underrated Bond films. What is it? The World Is Not Enough. But anyway, I don't want to take us too far off on a tangent, and I'll try to circle us back a little to Tarkovsky, who I just think had a really interesting life. One thing I was going to say about this movie that's kind of cool too is that he was really fascinated with like some of the classic elements of drama and stuff like that. And one of the things he wanted to achieve in Stalker was what's it called? The dramatic unities, which is this thing that Aristotle made up or came up with, back in the ancient times, which is the idea of like sort of these three elements that like a well-told every well-told story should have. And in this, it was sort of like adhering to adhering to sort of like a single location happening within the span of a single day, more or less, and that's basically what he's trying to achieve with that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it's called like unity of action, unity of time, unity of place. So it's it should have main action with minimal to no subplots. The action should occur within a time period of 24 hours or less, and it should exist in a single physical space and not try to move around too much. Those were his rules and stuff for like a well-told story. Anyway, for whatever reason, I guess Tarkovsky maybe he saw it as a challenge, and that was one of the things he's trying to do with Mirror, and it more or less does follow those rules. But yeah, I remember studying this stuff years and years ago. His rules for drama and stuff like that. There's dramatic unities is only part of it. There's this whole other thing about rising action and climax and all that stuff. I can't remember anymore, but it's good stuff. I mean, we still talk about it thousands of years later. But also the whole color and monochrome thing also comes up in Andrei Rublev, I guess, where I think only the epilogue is in color and the rest is in a black and white or some sort of monochrome thing. Much like how this movie has the sepia sequences. Tarkovsky at one point dismissed color film as a commercial gimmick. This was back in the 60s. That is funny, though. I was going to say, it is funny how when new technologies come along, the way humans first view it is always really different from what becomes the norm later on. Because it is true, even as late as the 60s, him talking about being a commercial gimmick. Now, I will say by the 60s, that's when films were almost all in color. That was really when the switchover came. But if you go back to, say, the end of the 30s, like, or the start of the 40s, when color was, like, just introduced, like, I think Wizard of Oz is, like, the first mainstream American film to use color, and they did it to great effect, having the reveal, right? Because the opening is in black and white, then they get to Oz, it's color. Must have been wonderful for the audience. But as wonderful as it was for the audience, most people in that time honestly didn't think that meant that films going forward would use color. What's really weird is they saw color as exactly the way it was used in Wizard of Oz as the way it would always be used. That color would only represent fantasy, and that it wasn't realistic to show color movies. That it would only be one of those sequences. And yet, real life is color. But that's honestly how they saw it. It's the same idea as how, like, when the telephone was invented, you'd think people would have been psyched. Yeah. But most people thought it was stupid as hell. They're like, why do we need it? It's not too hard to go talk to people. That's just going to be a fucking bother. Like, it's hilarious, like, how people keep viewing technology, like, completely wrong when it first comes out. Because, yeah, you would think, without knowing, you would just be like, people must have been blown away by the idea of calling people and talking to them. But most people are like, it's a stupid gimmick. Like, they honestly thought that, which is hilarious. Just like, again, going back to film, when film was making the transition from silent into sound, a lot of people were just like, sound, that's never going to catch on. That's not how you do movies, That's because it was just so ingrained, So yeah, by the 60s, of course, color had become somewhat the norm, or at least it was half and half. But Tarkovsky thought it was a commercial gimmick, although eventually he did incorporate it into his stuff, which I think is helpful because of his tendency to focus on dream stuff, which is another reason why I really like this movie to a certain extent too, but why I really, really like Mirror, is that Mirror has two of my favorite things in all of fiction, which is dreams and memory. And he just does really great stuff with color and effects and stuff to give you those sorts of hazy, dreamlike quality to the sequences that I absolutely adore. It's played down a bit in Stalker, but you still see it to a certain extent. He also really likes to juxtapose people in scenes with fire and water. This film does a great job of it. Again, the last sequence before they leave, or we see them leave the zone, is the water all cascading down. There's a wonderful, wonderful shot early on in Mirror where he's having the memory of the barn on the childhood farm he grew up on, where the barn is burning down. And it's so great because it's like this shot within a doorway. It had been raining, and the water's all dripping down the doorway, and yet out in the background, this everything's whipped up in flames. It's just gorgeous. And this comes right out of a dream sequence where he's dreaming about his mother washing her hair, and they're using like weird. I don't know if they're moving the film backwards or what, but like her hair's going up and the water's coming down. It's really great. He does some really, really great visual things in his movies, and it definitely makes me want to seek out more. I mean, I feel pretty good now having seen Solaris, Mirror, and now Stalker. They're all really great films. So I really, really want to see Andrei Rublev, although I'll have to put some time aside for that because that's over 3 hours long. But his last film was made in Sweden. It was called The Sacrifice, and it actually has like a nuclear holocaust, like killing everybody off. And there's some guy that says he'll sacrifice everything he loves if God will save the world or something. And anyway, it was a big homage to Ingmar Bergman. It sounds really cool. So yeah, I mean Tarkovsky. I first saw Solaris probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and I really liked it. But I never actually followed up on watching any of his other films, even though I figured I probably would like them. But yeah, and doing this, I feel really enlightened in watching these films because they're really a joy to watch.
Yeah, I've never sat down and watched Solaris. I know I've seen some scenes from it, and I've seen some of the terrible remake.
I think I told you this before. I never saw the terrible remake, but again, my friend, same friend actually, who had been my roommate, he went to see it in a very lightly attended theater. There were probably about 6 or 7 other people in it, and he was the only person that stayed to the end. Every single other person walked out at some point during it.
Man, that really says something.
Yeah, that's Steven Soderbergh, who has done. I'm not really a fan of him, but he, I'm not going to say he's a terrible filmmaker. He's done some good stuff. So yeah, it's really something. I think he did that.
I'm actually a fan of his. I didn't realize he did that.
Yeah, that's him.
I mean, I should try to watch it again for some sort of do a commentary for it or something. Just maybe to see if I can get through it.
Yeah. Oh, that's what everybody said. Like the number one thing is so dull. Because again, it can show, I mean, because the original Solaris, I'm sure plenty of people could criticize it as dull because it's classics. Tarkovsky. It's got long, slow takes. It has fairly long sequences with characters having long, drawn-out conversations, all that. But the whole time I was entertained. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even blame. From what I've heard, it's not even so much Soderbergh's fault. Like a lot of the blame really falls on George Clooney, who I think really took the reins in the movie. From what I've heard,
it's only an hour and 39 minutes, and
yeah,
I had assumed Clooney directed it.
Yes, exactly. I'm pretty sure he started sort of ghost directing it in a way during it. I think.
I want to take my name off if I was Soderbergh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how true that is. Some people. I mean, it's been disputed by some people. I don't know. But yeah, Solaris. I definitely need to see it again because I haven't seen it in a few years. But I don't know. I'm a big fan of science fiction type stuff anyway, so that's pretty cool. It's basically the Russian science fiction film. But yeah, I really like Tarkovsky's style. I might even like his style more than Bergman's. I find his style more interesting than Bergman's. I think Bergman maybe has some better films, but if I was just going to talk about like visual style and stuff like that, I would say he almost took what Bergman did and built on it, made something better. Not to mention Bergman really avoided color. At least for at least most of his big movies. And again, I'm not saying it would be better to say make Persona in color. No, I don't think that. Or I couldn't even fathom the Seventh Seal in color. Like the Seventh Seal should definitely be in black and white and stuff. But I just really like. I just think how great his films look. Solaris. I also like how the characters all wear sort of like soft pastel colors. which really wasn't what anybody in space was doing at the time. I think that also gives it a nice look too.
Newfangled color.
It's a gimmick.
Do you remember? Well, I mean, obviously you don't remember, but did you ever see any of the when they would go back and add color to like black and white TV shows?
Yeah, they did that to what was the show I used to watch? The Beverly Hillbillies. They did that.
Mm-hmm. That was the main one that came to mind for me too.
But there were definitely a few others. I think they did it to the Dick Van Dyke Show too.
Mm-hmm. I think some movies also got the same treatment, but
yeah, there was this whole thing in like the mid '80s about colorizing black and white ones, and then there were various filmmakers that like stood up against it. They didn't want it to happen.
Well, you know,
I think what's his name? The guy that we did for Carl Reiner. I think he was one of those guys.
I was trying to think. There was a movie we may have done on the show that it actually was shot in color, but they had originally like lit it for black and white. So, I'm thinking of I think Nickelodeon was like the Peter Bogdanovich.
Oh, right.
They made him do it in color, the studio, but he actually his cinematographer, it was actually lit for black and white. So I think the Criterion release or some release has the black and white version on it. So that's kind of interesting. Because it is different. You would light it differently. So
there's this whole thing. In 1983, Hal Roach Studios became one of the first studios to venture into the business of computerized film colorization. Buying a 50% interest in Wilson Markel's Colorization Inc., began creating digitally colored versions of some of its films. Roach's Topper from 1937, followed by Way Out West, 1937, became the first black and white films to be redistributed in color using the digital colorization process. Damn it, there's that other sneeze again. Leading to controversy. Defenders of the process noted that it would allow black and white films to have new audiences of people who were not used to the format. Detractors complained, among other reasons, that the process was crude and claimed that even if it were refined, it would not take into account, as you said, lighting compositions chosen for black and white photography, which would not necessarily be as effective in color. Figures opposed to the process included Roger Ebert, James Stewart, John Huston, George Lucas, and Woody Allen. So yeah, there was this whole thing going on in the mid-'80s where certain studios were it was their own properties. Like, they could legally do it. Damn, what's wrong with me? But yeah, there was this whole thing about that. In 1986, film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert did a special episode of Siskel and Ebert addressing colorization as Hollywood's new vandalism. Siskel explained how networks were unable to show classic black and white films in prime time unless they offered in color. They arrest people who spray subway cars, they lock up people who attack paintings and sculptures in museums, and adding color to black and white films, even if it's only to the tape shown on DVD or shown in stores, is vandalism nonetheless. Roger Ebert added, "What was so wrong about black and white movies in the first place? By filming in black and white, movies can sometimes be more dreamlike and elegant and stylized and mysterious. They can add a whole additional dimension of reality, while color sometimes just supplies additional unnecessary information." A statement I agree with, which, like I said, is funny, because that's basically how I see black and white. But back at the time, for whatever reason, contemporary audiences thought the standard, black and white, was reality, and the color suggested dream and fantasy, which is really funny to me.
Well, I mean, now you could say almost the opposite. Like, people, I mean, there's a certain segment of the population that will refuse to watch black and white.
Yeah, which I think is a real shame. Yeah, and that's exactly why this was happening. As I said, like, by the 80s, you were getting into people that were only used to only color, and it's only gotten more so at this point. Yeah, there was even this thing in 1989 about releasing a colorized version of Citizen Kane, which they managed to stop from happening.
Why?
And it works as a precursor to stuff like we've seen, like say what George Lucas did with the Star Wars films and stuff, right?
Well, you remember what was the film that Frank Darabont did? It was based on Stephen King.
Oh, The Shawshank Redemption.
No, it was a horror movie.
Oh,
Um,
you do The Mist?
yeah, The Mist. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
because they re-released a black and white version of it, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody
It
says
was
it's better.
same type thing there. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
seen the black and white, but
I actually
I'd like
saw it.
to.
They showed it on TV once. I
Really?
actually saw it. They got it. They aired the black and white. I don't know if it's better, but it's just as good.
Yeah. Some of the creature effects was one of the problems I had, and I'm sure they would look better in black and white. But
Yeah, that is for sure. Yeah, they definitely. It's more seamless, I guess, when you don't have the colors to stand out against each other.
that's another. He wanted to shoot it in black and white, and they wouldn't let him, which is understandable. Because people probably wouldn't go see it. I mean, I don't think people went and saw it anyway, but I don't think people would go see it.
Too bad. I think it's one of the better adaptations from back then. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's good.
I
I mean,
like it.
it's certainly I think it's a entertaining watch for sure, and that's really the only point.
As far as horror Stephen King adaptations go, it's definitely near the top, I would say. Because there's lots of bad ones. Mostly directed by Mick Garris.
Just reading about Tarkovsky's deaths here. Conspiracy theory emerged in Russia in the early 90s. It was alleged that Tarkovsky did not die of natural causes, but was assassinated by the KGB. Evidence for this hypothesis included testimonies by former KGB agents who claimed that Viktor Chebrikov gave the order to eradicate Tarkovsky to curtail what the Soviet government and the KGB saw as its anti-Soviet propaganda. Other evidence includes several memoranda that surfaced after the 91 coup and the claim by one of Tarkovsky's doctors that his cancer could not have developed from a natural cause. And then there's the whole thing, as you said, his wife, Larisa Tarkovskaya, and Anatoly Solistin all died the very same type of lung cancer. Vladimir Sharin, sound designer and Stalker, is convinced that they were all poisoned by the chemical plant they were shooting for the film. So yeah, crazy.
I mean, I don't know. They both make sense. Both reasons.
Mm-hmm. Who knows? I would say that the whole idea of the doctor saying it's not a natural kind of cancer doesn't necessarily mean an assassination, but it gives credence to the other thing that he got it from some sort of exposure to, I don't know, radiation or whatever. There's plenty of radiated zones in the old Soviet Union to this day, not just Chernobyl.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's kind of ironic because
He died the same year as Chernobyl, 86. Yeah, I read about Chernobyl all the time. It's so interesting.
It's still
I've always been fascinated with areas that have been abandoned. I always look at that's one of my favorite things in fiction is a lot of the post-apocalyptic stuff. I really like the idea of the Earth after either humans have died or most humans have died and civilization is gone and nature's retaking it, and you see cities and stuff that are being overgrown by plants. All this stuff really fascinates me, and I think it's all very beautiful. It's one of the things we'll talk about the game that I've got on the PlayStation 4. Near Automata. Near Automata takes place in a world like that, and I think some of it's just gorgeous to see. You're in this world where mankind has died out hundreds of years ago, and all the cities are laid to waste, and nature's overtaking it. Just some beautiful, beautiful stuff in there. That's one of my favorite kinds of art is that kind of stuff. So, just in real life, I like looking at places like that, towns that have been abandoned or factories and stuff. And as I said, there's probably no place on earth that has more of it than Russia and the former Soviet Union. Just so many places that failed or were abandoned or overgrown and stuff now.
Speaking of that,
perfect for Stalker's setting. A great place for the zone to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool that you mentioned that. There's a lot of abandoned theme parks that people go to and take pictures of, and
yeah, I totally would do that.
There's one Land of Oz. It was like a Wizard of Oz themed park in North Carolina that's been abandoned for years. It was in the 70s is when it started, but it's got some pretty interesting photos you want to check out.
Yeah, like countries like Russia and Japan and China all have like these things that were like big government projects
Yeah.
at one point that would eventually get abandoned and stuff. Like islands that used to like there's an island in Japan that used to have like all these people on it, and they all had to leave because it wasn't safe and stuff. And so it's all just there, this island community. Like there's all sorts of cool stuff like that that I like looking at. Some really interesting stuff, and I just love seeing places where like yeah, nature's starting to take over and it's growing over the building and stuff. It's all really cool. Always had a big fascination with that kind of stuff. Let's see, we were shooting near Italian in the area around the small river Jagala with a half-functioning hydroelectric station. Up the river was a chemical plant, and it poured out poisonous liquids downstream. There was even this shot in Stalker, snow falling in the summer, and white foam floating down the river. In fact, it was some horrible poison. Many women in our crew got allergic reactions on their faces. Tarkovsky died from cancer on the right bronchial tube, and Toila Solistin too. This was all connected to the location shooting for Stalker. It became clear to me when Larissa Tarkovskaya died from the same illness in Paris. Yeah, that's Vladimir Shurin, the sound designer. It's one of his quotes.
That's what he thinks happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To say. The soundtrack's really cool. It's got like haunting sort of synthesizers going out through it, which really fits. It's sparsely used, which is probably for the good. Like there's very long segments in the movie without any music at all, and then every once in a while it comes up. It's very deftly done, I think, to add to the atmosphere. The score was done by Eduard Artemiev, who also did the score for Solaris and Mirror. And as we were trying to find out, yeah, the ending music when they're showing the shot of the Stalker's daughter is a part of a selection from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony,
Mm-hmm.
but not the Ode to Joy part, but it's another part, and that people, well, if you hear it, you would know it. It's well known and used in all sorts of stuff. Actually, the music went through all sorts of not exactly changes, but there's a lot of discussion about it. In that Tarkovsky at first really had absolutely no idea what he wanted the music to be. Like when he set out, he didn't have any sort of idea. And I guess he had to have a lot of discussions with Artemiev about it. And there were they had several ideas that they didn't follow through on. One of Tarkovsky's ideas was to perform Western music on Oriental instruments or vice versa, performing Oriental music on European instruments. But no, they didn't do that and stuff. So they had a few different sort of ideas. Proposed to invite musicians from Armenia and Azerbaijan and let them improvise on the melody. So yeah, a few different approaches before they got down to what they came up with.
I think all of those would be cool.
Yeah, you can see how it would. It's too bad, as we said, if he'd lived longer and done more films, he might have been able to explore that in a different film. Might have been cool.
I don't know if you mentioned this already, but the reason why it's in two segments is a lot of the original negatives were destroyed.
Or lost, yeah. And they had to reshoot.
Yeah, they had to reshoot with a different cinematographer, so they were kind of forced to do it like that. But it works. And what was this shot on? I know they said it was a film stock that I'm not familiar with.
Oh, I'm not sure. Funny, because I was reading about something, I don't know if it was one of the ones we had done, where I was reading about how instead of using the 35 millimeter, they were using 60 because they wanted to get more detail in, but I can't remember what that was for. That wasn't this, that was something else.
Okay.
Not to confuse the issue. But I was just reading about that recently, and I wonder if it was something that we covered. I can't remember what it was for now, which is too bad. But that is a good question. Tarkovsky shot Stalker 3 times, consuming over 5,000 meters of film. People who have seen both the first version, shot by Redberg, who was director of photography, and the final theatrical release, say they are almost identical. So they came pretty close in the next shot, I guess, of covering what they did.
Kodak
okay,
5247.
I haven't heard of that either.
Soviet lavatories we're not very familiar with.
That's interesting. Yeah. I got, I didn't watch this one with headphones on, but I get the feeling this had really good sound design in it. There's a whole
Mhm.
section on Wikipedia about the sound design. I mean, there's some really great parts just when they're doing the crossing over into the zone, when they're on that railway car. Like, there's like some really great echoing sounds going on and stuff. And you can even hear, I think, a bird crying in the distance. There's some really, really good sound going on. As you said, I bet this would look and sound really good on a remastered Blu-ray. Um, Definitely be a really good film to own, I think. Although I still think I like Mirror more. I really, really love Mirror. I was actually kind of deeply moved by Mirror. Even when I was sort of even though I kind of knew what to expect, it still kind of caught me off guard and stuff. How much I wound up liking it. Because I mean that's the type of film that can also go so wrong, right? When you're doing sort of like a deeply personal movie like that, that's very arty and jumps around, is very poetic. That can backfire horribly, and you just wind up with like what might be seen as like a pretentious piece of crap. But I thought the complete opposite. I thought it all was really well done. Just sort of a beautiful movie.
Yeah, apparently Beethoven's Ninth was in the opening scene also, but they took that out and just put the ambient sounds in there.
Yeah. So it's
Which
funny in talking about Chernobyl. A lot of people refer to the area that Chernobyl, that you can't. It's called the zone of alienation, which is kind of a direct uh, reference to this film. What's weird is, yeah, they made there's a video game from 2007 called Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl, which is kind of based on the film and the novel and the Chernobyl incident, all kind of rolled into one. I'd be interested to see what that's like. It's a first person shooter.
just trying to read all the comments here.
Yeah.
Jacob McCallum says you can absolutely tell The Mist was filmed in black and white.
Mist is great.
There's an eerie glow to the movie, and the shadows are darker, and the effects work much better. It's kind of what I assumed.
Yeah, so I rarely wind up watching these movies on YouTube because I don't usually like the quality and try to find it somewhere else. But this movie is on YouTube and it looks pretty good. So I would totally recommend that to people. It's a longish movie, but it's a very rewarding one.
So is
And
Mirror.
if you don't have other options, watching it on YouTube is actually a pretty solid one and stuff. And yeah, as I said, I probably prefer Mirror even more. I was really, really impressed with Mirror. It made a big impression on me. I really loved it. The nonlinear storytelling, the fractured narrative with sort of 3 different timelines interweaving, and stuff like that. Speaking of like quotes again, this is just sort of random, but it's something I wrote down that I remembered from Mirror, which I thought was kind of funny. So there's the part in the era where he's remembering his mother when his mother in the pre-war era was working for a newspaper as a proofreader, and she's upset because she thinks maybe she made a mistake. She's trying to catch up to them before they publish and stuff. And she's talking to some guy who I think is maybe an editor or something like that. And she says something about like being afraid of making a mistake or something like that. And he says something that I think is very Soviet of the time, where he says something like not to be afraid. And then he said, well, people should work. Others should be afraid, which to me just sounds like it should have been like the fucking slogan of the Soviet Party in those days. You can imagine like a picture of Stalin's face. It would say, "People should work. Others should be afraid." I thought that was perfect. It stayed with me. But that movie's, yeah, as you said, it's a bit of a confusing watch, obviously, because of its narrative and structure and stuff. But also, there were some things I had to double check on because it also has some newsreel footage of real stuff, mostly like war stuff. But what confused me was, most of it they show like World War II stuff. World War II obviously looming large in this movie and for Russia. World War II is the most, if I can do one of my historical spiels, it's the most devastating conflict in human history. and no country suffered more from that than Russia. Like they're in terms of property value damage and human life, like they are at the top with like kind of on their own. I think Poland might be a kind of distant second and stuff. So it was just a war that ripped the country apart and decimated it. And it's funny when you think about it, because World War II is when America and the Soviet Union both emerged as the two superpowers, but in much different ways. In that the U.S. is, though it's very tragic that the U.S. lost the soldiers they did in the conflict, especially in the Pacific Theater. The fact was, the U.S. itself was never touched. Meanwhile, Russia had been invaded and bombed, and people were starving, and every bad thing that a war can do had done to the Russian people and stuff. And what came out of it was the rise of a madman like Stalin, who would then clamp down on the country for the next 15 years in a fucking reign of terror, where if you stepped out of line, your whole family got shot, and you're living on collective farms and you can't even eat anything. So yeah, World War II obviously would loom large in the life of any Russian from the 20th century for sure. And but what's interesting is there was some footage that wasn't necessarily World War II footage. I had to check on it because I wasn't sure, and this is where it gets confusing, because there's actually some footage of the Spanish Civil War in there, which you don't really think affects Russia, but the fact is they're talking about how they had like some sort of, I don't know, his parents had like some sort of like Spanish neighbor or something that was married to the woman or something. So that's why they're talking about that they'd actually come to Russia to get away from the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War was one of many smaller conflicts or wars that got absorbed into World War II. In case people don't know that, yeah, when World War II started in 1939, there were already several other wars going on that had got absorbed into the larger conflict. One was Russia's war against Finland, called the Winter War, which only lasted for about 8 months, when Russia tried to invade Finland and then basically had to give up because then the Germans were coming after them. And as we said before, the second Sino-Japanese War had started in 1937 when Japan was invading China, and that also got absorbed into the larger conflict. So there are several things going on. So, and then speaking of China, another thing they showed footage of that probably is really confusing. If you remember Amir, where there's a whole bunch of shots of all these Chinese people all in big lines and yelling and waving things and pictures of Chairman Mao and stuff. If you're wondering what that was something called the Sino-Soviet border conflict, which is something that happened in 1969, where Russia and China almost went to war because of a border dispute and had a big standoff. See, that's something I didn't find out until many years later. Like, I think here in the West, we always hear about when we talk about like the Cold War and and things that could have gone wrong, we hear about like the Bay of Pigs and stuff like that. But mostly we hear about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Russians were putting nuclear weapons on Cuba, which would have been like crazy because then the U.S. would have been in firing range. So the big standoff in 1962. But what's less reported over here is that in 1969, there was almost a war between Russia and China. I mean, can you imagine what that could have done? And luckily, that kind of flamed out, although it did a problem. So that's what it's showing. That's why you suddenly see Chinese people in the middle of that movie. They're showing footage from that thing, which is something I don't think too many non-Russians today are that aware of. I was kind of aware of it, but only in like the last few years. It's not something I ever really grew up doing or anything like that. So yeah, so there's a few things in there that make things all the more confusing, but it all does fit in. It fits in as a very cool sort of mosaic of somebody's life. And it's true, because I think it's true. When somebody reflects on their life, we don't remember things chronologically. Things just come to us as they come to us. And then we have, sort of association, weird random associations. Something that happened when you were 22 might make you think of something that happened when you were in grade 3, or vice versa. And that's kind of what's going on in Mirror. And one of the things I really like about it, I think it's just so well done, and it's so beautiful. But anyway, it's a bit of a tangent, but wanted to get some of my stuff on about there. Because the other thing is his family lived through the siege of Leningrad, which is again one of the worst things that happened to Russia during the war. Was a very, very long siege in what was then the capital, with German forces outside, bombing and shelling at them for months, and them not having really the resources to fight them off. That was the other thing. Russia was a huge country with a ton of people, but not enough stuff for any of them. Like, I remember there's that sequence in the film Enemy at the Gates. Remember, where our main character doesn't even get a rifle. because they don't have enough rifles for all the soldiers. So they say, okay, you guys without rifles, you run behind the guys with the rifles. And when they get killed, they don't say if, they say when they get killed, you stop and pick up their rifle. And I mean, that's completely true. That's how it went down in a lot of stuff for the poor Russian forces. To this day, I know there are quite a few Russians that feel that Russia does not get the amount of respect it deserves for the role it played in World War II regarding how they dealt with the Germans and also the losses they sustained. So I'm just going to say, hey, Russians, we get you. And Tarkovsky does a good job of showing that. As I said, I think Tarkovsky was probably, like a lot of people, sort of somewhat of a conflicted person in that I think he was a very probably patriotic guy that loved where he was from and believed in a lot of things, but also had a lot of issues with the Soviet Party and a lot of their ideas. And it certainly stifled him and made things difficult for him as a filmmaker. And as we said, for all we know, the KGB really did murder him. I don't know. I'm not trying to throw conspiracy theories out there. I'm just saying that's something that people do. Some people believe. I'm not saying it's credible, but it's still something. It's still a possibility, I guess.
Well, that would be really sad if that was true, because I mean, he's kind of like a national treasure now, right?
I know, right? Like he'd be like a great ambassador for Russia, really. Yeah. Like a great way of like, oh, if you want to learn some stuff about Russia and stuff, here's one of their best filmmakers and artists. Yeah. So to think his own government had him killed would be just awful. So I really hope not. But yeah, it's interesting in that, like, he obviously liked Bergman so much, but I feel like he did such a great job of not just copying Bergman's style, but developing one of his own that I actually think is kind of, well, to my taste, even better. And I really like. I've seen like about 5 or 6 Bergman films. Now I've seen 3 of his, and there's definitely a couple on my list that I really want to see. I want to see his last film, and I want to see Arvin Rutsov, or whatever it's called. But not sure when we get to that. But since we are sort of behind and stuff, but we are hoping to get back to normal and be on Tuesday. I'm not sure what Tuesday's episode will be. I'm leaning towards Kubrick, but we have not had that discussion yet. But we'll let you know as soon as we can, and hopefully we will return to some consistency and normalcy and get some episodes going in a row here. I think it'll be a little easier for me personally. I think. I don't know, but we'll see. Stuff always comes up and stuff. We try our best. I know.
Yeah, I mean, where else are you going to see talk about Tarkovsky one week? We may talk about the new Kevin Costner film the next week. You never know.
Yeah. I'd like to think, that in the vast wilderness that is YouTube, we still stand out as something original. And if you've been following us, we really appreciate that, having you with us. And if you're watching live tonight, bravo, because
absolutely.
Because we kind of just dropped this one out of nowhere, and this is the night that the Sausage Factory ordinarily airs, but there's no episode tonight, so we figured we might as well take advantage of that and try to get ourselves back on track here. But yeah, the next couple days, Jay and I will discuss what our next films are, because we have about 3 more of these to go, I think, maybe even 4. Because there's a French filmmaker I want to do, another Japanese filmmaker, Kubrick, and maybe somebody else. There's about 3 or 4 more of those to go. And considering we had that big long break in the middle, I don't think anybody can really be burnt out on it. And they're all quite different. So anyway, I'm enjoying myself when we're actually making it work. So as I said, so far I think Mirror might be the one I'm happiest to have been exposed to, as one I didn't know beforehand. As we said, when we're covering these guys, we're for the most part trying to do movies that aren't necessarily their most well-known or famous movie, try to go at least a little bit off the board, not just for you guys, but also for ourselves, because it gives us an opportunity to see something that we probably hadn't seen before. And in the case of Tarkovsky, it's worked out well for me. I really enjoyed Mirror and Stalker quite a bit. And now it makes me want to, as I said, it makes me want to rewatch Solaris, because I haven't seen it in a few years, and also hunt down a couple more of his others. Really, really great filmmaker, really interesting stuff. Really great poetic voice. But was there any current thing or just extraneous issues you wanted to talk about?
I wanted to hit on something.
Yeah, sure.
I was talking before we started recording. They just announced something about the new Han Solo film. Lando is apparently going to be pansexual. One of the writers that announced that.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
they've pretty much like finished filming, right? I mean, they've already like there's like test screenings and stuff out, right?
yeah. As far as, oh yeah.
So
There's already been some like early reviews on Letterboxd.
that are not good, right?
No, they're not good.
Um,
I don't like the. I mean, I know this is what everybody expects me to say because of my feelings for Harrison Ford, but I do not like this guy playing Han at all.
I don't.
It looks like, honestly, it looks to me like he was cast as if this is a world where Harrison Ford didn't play Han Solo, but Kurt Russell did. He looks like a young Kurt Russell, and he sounds like a young Kurt Russell.
Yeah,
He doesn't remind me at all of Harrison Ford. I'm not saying, oh, go out there and get a Harrison Ford clone. I know, but I mean, something. This guy just, I don't see any correlation between the character that we've seen beforehand in this younger version. I know that's always tricky when you're getting a young actor to play the young version of an old. It's never perfect. It's not a perfect science, but this looks like a massive disconnect to me.
River Phoenix is dead.
River
Phoenix is not alive anymore. But I mean, just imagine how hard that is, though. The shoes to fill. I mean, not only do you have to have somebody that looks like Harrison Ford, but they have to be able to act too. And,
yeah. Again, I know that's not easy, but I have to say that they have all the resources in the world available to them, right? They do a massive casting call, have tons of actors. There's always somebody. I don't know. I'm not trying to prejudge a movie as I always do, but I mean, that's the thing that stands out for me. That's because obviously I love Harrison Ford and Han, so that's what I focus on. I mean, it's called Solo. That's what it's about. Solo. He's the main character, and that's what I focus on. I don't like this guy. Don't like it. As for the thing about Lando, I mean, I guess that's fine. I mean, for people who are not sure of the definition of pansexual, a pansexual is a person that doesn't take gender into account when they're attracted to somebody. They don't necessarily identify that they're gay or straight or bi or anything like that. They just like who they like. It doesn't really matter to them what the gender is. They just don't see things in that term when they're attracted. And that's fine. And I can even see how it might even apply to a character like Lando. So it's not exactly me criticizing, but as you pointed out, it's just kind of weird to do it to a character that's already been established.
That's my only problem,
right?
I don't really. Why do we need to be talking about people's sexualities anyway? I don't really know why it needs to be discussed in the movie. It's not like it's going to be a pivotal to the plot at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of how I feel too. If you're going to take that step, then make it pivotal to the plot. Otherwise, you just throw stuff in. I mean, you can't go back and say, for instance, oh, well, Han was gay, because that would ruin the plot, because Han has a relationship and a romance with Leia, right? So you can't do that. But you could have a new character and say they are gay, and instead of just throw it away, actually make it matter and have them have a relationship with somebody. That makes sense. But just doing this throwaway, oh, by the way, if you were wondering, they actually have this other attraction. Well, okay, well, I'm not sure what purpose that fulfills. I mean, I guess there's people there saying, oh, this is a good, I don't know, and everybody worries about representation now, and I'm not going to say that they shouldn't. I'm just saying sometimes the way these people try to implement it so the people are represented is flawed. Because I remember a few years ago when people were talking about, they were doing the shipping, where they thought it would be cute if Finn and Poe,
I was going to bring that up too,
had a relationship and stuff like that. The way, and I'm almost ashamed of myself for the way I thought of it first. Because at first I just thought, well, I'm not against gay stuff or anything, but that's not the time or place. I feel bad about that now. I shouldn't have felt that way, because I think that is a wrong way of thinking. Because all I'm saying is, yeah, gay is weird and other, and we should just put it over here. It can't be over here. So, no, I don't. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But I'm just saying you have to establish it from the start. You can't just toss it in later, So as far as I know, nothing has been shown in those movies to confirm that. So they can't suddenly come up with a sequel that does confirm it, because that is just pandering. That's just throwing it in.
I was thinking that one of the two was going to have a relationship with Rey, and obviously it's probably not going to be Poe at this point. I mean, what was his name? Finn at this point. It's going to be Poe.
Which I think doesn't make any sense. Because Poe has, no scenes with Rey. And in the last movie, Finn is obsessed with Rey. The whole point is he needs to get back to Rey. He needs to find Rey.
Well, he has his romantic interest now.
Well, yeah, that girl has a crush on him. But as far as I know, he does. Okay, this is the way I see it. Doesn't mean anything. But the way I see it is she has a crush on him, but he doesn't notice her at all because he's obsessed with Rey.
Well, he noticed her when she almost died.
Yeah, I mean, but didn't notice her in a romantic way.
Well, maybe that changed his feelings. I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and
whatever.
I'm saying you can do that, but I just mean, but the idea that she's going to get together with Poe makes no sense because they've had like one scene together. So why would that happen? It seems more credible at this point that she's going to get together with Kylo.
I
You
just don't
know,
like that we have to
they've
totally.
already had their weird sexual tension where she's like, Jedi talking to him when his shirt's off and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really weird when you think about the fact that that was actually like part of Snoke's plan or Snoke's plan. Like, remember, he was the reason why they were able to do it. Like, they weren't powerful enough to do it themselves, but a part of his plot, he was
Right.
making it so they could. So, like, is he that devious? He's like, this is perfect. His shirt is off. This will fill the scene with all sorts of sexual tension and confuse them.
Well, I mean, I kind of felt like that. He orchestrated all that. Like
Yeah.
that. When his shirt was off, maybe Kylo Ren wasn't involved at all. Maybe it was all projected by Snoke.
Yeah. As I said, I hadn't occurred to that me for a while, and then when I thought about it, I was like, wow, he really is devious if he thinks things on that level. I mean, hats off if they made him that way. And then they killed him off, and everybody complained. They're like, well, who was Snoke? I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, do people flip out when whatchamacallit came out, and they're like, who is the Emperor? You know? Then we had 3 movies that told us who the Emperor was, and nobody liked them. Not nobody, but you know what I mean. Anyway, we go on forever about Star Wars. But
well, people are all revved up to hate this thing, and that's fine. It seems to be that's the.
I've liked all the new Star Wars so far. I haven't loved them. Well, actually, that's not true. I loved the last one. I loved Last Jedi. I thought it was.
I was mixed on Rogue One.
Rogue One, I'm mixed on too, because there are things I really like about it, and then there's things I think are completely pointless about it. So,
now we can move on with all new characters because Carrie Fisher's dead, Han Solo is dead, Luke is dead, so they're not going to be in the movie. So we can kind of like the whole put the past to rest. Or
I know, and I know they hit us over the head with it in Last Jedi, but I mean, I think this is if there was ever an audience that needed it, it's the Star Wars audience. I'm sorry, and I know a lot of them didn't want to hear that.
But anyway, my whole big problem with this thing with him writing in Lando is they're just like shoehorning this in when he was already an established character. I know people say, well, how do you know he wasn't already?
I know, but
whatever,
I know,
but,
fair enough. But he was ladies' man.
Billy D. Williams was a ladies' man. I don't know about Lando, but Billy D. Williams, certified ladies' man, and he'll tell you right now.
Still is.
I mean, drink a Colt 45, but I don't know. It feels to me like they're writing based on political motivations or some sort of
trends. It's
trying to appeal to certain audiences, and I just don't feel like that's the way you need to write at all.
See, you shouldn't turn sexuality into a trend. It's a stupid thing to do. How is that? I mean, if you're somebody that feels that your sexual identity is other than the norm or whatever, you're LGBTQ, like, do you really feel happy when they just throw stuff out as if you're like an idiot? It's like, oh, here's some little thing because that's what's trendy right now. I would feel, disrespected that way. I mean, I want to see myself represented fairly and well, not, oh, here's a bone for you. Here, guess what? He's gonna check out Han's ass. Here, you'll enjoy that, won't you? Like,
but I mean, I just don't know why you
fully formed characters.
I hope they don't do that. But I just don't know why, like, the identity of the character is so entrenched in his sexuality. I mean, I don't even know why it needs to be addressed at all, really. Well, it's like it doesn't define you. Your sexuality doesn't define you as a person.
Not usually, but I mean, it defines how relationships go forward.
Right. But,
as I said, I'd be all for them having a character that is pansexual or whatever and actually having a relationship with it. But if this is just some throwaway thing, it's just like, oh, by the way, he identifies this way, but it doesn't actually have anything to do with the plot. Well, then, yeah, that's, it's mindless pandering. And I just don't know if somebody, I can't speak for everybody. Obviously, I can only speak for myself, but it just seems like a Almost insulting, really. Because it's like, there, now you happy? There's your representation. Pat you on the head. Like, no.
I mean, how many people out there are pansexual anyway?
I don't know.
Like, I mean, I would be okay if Lando was out there just like plowing whatever the hell the people are. The job of the Hutt is, which that goes on, and go for it. Whatever. I don't care. I don't.
I mean, it's definitely a world where different species have sex. I'm not, but again, is that supposed to be a big part of the plot of Star Wars? It's more about adventures, right? So like, what avenue are we going down here? I'm not a repressed person. I like sexy stuff. I'm just saying it was never really the main focus in Star Wars. And since this isn't a romance, that's why it seems pointless. Because yes, one of the main parts of the original Star Wars is there was a romance between Leia and Han. But if this doesn't have anything to do with a romance or character relationship, then it just seems like a throwaway affair.
You never watched The Wire, did you?
I watched the first 2 seasons. I keep meaning to watch more. I always liked it.
Well, it's like Jacob McCollum points out in the comments that Omar was gay on The Wire.
And yet you would really know. You would never really know.
But it wasn't. I mean, they just showed it like a time or two, and that was it. It was never like, every scene he's in and has to be pointed out. I mean, so what,
Yeah, I know that. Just again, instead of making, because people talk about representation of like different sexual orientations, and that is important. But if your representation is just a way to make them look even like more different, it's not good.
Exactly. I mean, there's a show I like a lot, another cop drama called Southland, that had a cop character that was really the more of the alpha male type, aggressive cop who you found out later on in the seasons that he was gay, but it was never commented on other than you saw him go home with a man to his house, and that was it. But, yeah. And I think that's handling it with respect. I mean, wouldn't you think? I mean,
in one way, it like breaks a stereotype. It's like, not all gays are blah, blah, blah. And they also make it say like, this is a gay character, but we're not going to just clumsily like flout it all the time and make it seem like the core part of his character. It's like this is a full character and he's got other things going on. As many people like to point out, like gay, obviously your sexuality certainly can influence your personality, absolutely, and we see it all the time, especially like in like gay men that are like effeminate and stuff like that. But it's still not your personality. Gay is not personality. Straight is not personality. It certainly plays a role in it, but yeah, you can't just see people that way.
I just feel like it's too much of a thing that's focused on in our society. That and race, like, why harp on it? Why are we harping on these things so much? If everybody's equal, let's not harp on the shit. This is kind of the way I feel about it.
Like I said, I understand the arguments for representation. It's just a very tricky thing to pull off in a way that satisfies people and does a good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often you're trying to cover bases and get representation, and yet all you're doing is just a bunch of token shit. Yep. Like, oh, we need we need this Latin character in here, so we'll just throw them in for the hell of it. Like, who cares about them being like a fully fleshed character? They're Latin, so we're covering that base. We need the gay character, so they were covering that base. But you're not actually doing anything. You're not making full characters. You're reducing them to stereotypes.
I mean, that seems more insulting to me, doing it like that.
It's more insulting. Because all it is just like trying to touch a base. Okay, they're represented now. They're represented in the most half-assed, stereotypical way.
Right.
Well, there's your representation. And I understand everything takes time. As you're moving things forward, that's how it always starts, right? Even like if you go back to like black actors, right? The first black actors had to play like stereotypical roles that nowadays would be seen as racist caricatures. And I'm not saying that's great, but it got things moving.
Yeah.
And right now we're trying to get things moving kind of all at once in a million directions. And I don't know, there's no shortcut for that and stuff. And I'm not trying to say, oh, the world isn't ready for it. The world is ready for whatever. Just do it properly. It's tricky. I get it. It's tricky. But I don't know.
Just be cool. Don't be an asshole. Everybody, don't be assholes. That's what we all need to do, and we'd all get along well together.
Yeah. Well, just stop judging people for like one thing like that. Like, the sexuality or the race or ever like that. That's not how you should judge people. It's pretty simple, really. You should judge people for how they actually behave and
Right.
stuff instead of surface things like that. And again, I say surface things, and suddenly it's like, what, race is important, sexuality isn't important. I get it. It's like it's a no-win situation for me. I'm just saying, it's complicated. I guess I will go see the Star Wars movie because I don't know. I kind of miss seeing movies. I hadn't seen too many movies in the theater for a while until I saw Infinity War, and it reminded me how much I enjoy seeing movies in the theater. I still like it. I know nowadays everyone's like, "Oh, the theater sucks," and it's this is why the theater sucks, and I still like it. And I have to go by myself half the time, which isn't fun. Going to the theater by yourself,
It's not.
I mean, I'm used to it. I've been doing it for years, and I still don't really like it. Especially if it's a big movie. It's no fun going to a big movie by yourself and seeing all the people together and stuff like that. That's why I usually go to movies like at weird times in the afternoon, so it's not such a big deal that I'm alone. But, I mean, I still like going to the movies. I really wanted Ryan to go see Infinity War, but his wife was going to have surgery like in the next few days or something.
Wow.
I think she'd be like bedridden for a while, so he can't get out anywhere. So I can't be mad at him or anything like that. But I just mean, that was one where I was really thinking I wouldn't be going alone. But, shit happens and stuff. And she's all right. And positive vibes to her. But I hope, just for his own sake, he can see the movie because I know he'd like to see it.
Yeah, I know he's got a lot going on. Yeah, I still like the experience. I almost feel like we need to appreciate it while it's still here because I don't see it.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, how much longer is it going to last?
At least on the scale we have it now, I don't think it's possible for it to last. I mean, they're going to keep trying to play on trends and find other ways to raise ticket price. And
yeah, I'm always reading articles, these troublesome articles. I haven't really seen much of it here where I live, but like all sorts of places in the States where all these theaters are resorting to weird gimmicks and stuff just to get people in.
Yeah,
I'm just like, that's sad. Like
they're serving food.
You're already showing this thing on a massive screen with great sound and everything like that in nice, comfortable chairs, unless you're like 600 pounds.
Well, I mean, a lot of it seems cool to me. Like they serve, food and, so you can get beer and, wine and stuff. So it's,
Yeah, I mean, it's worth a try. I'm just saying it's sad that it's been reduced to this,
Yeah. But I mean, at least if it's, in an adult setting, you won't have to worry about kids being the problem.
And as we said, like, it's just, I understand how like difficult the situation's gotten for everybody. I'm paying $15, which feels like way too much for my ticket. And then I realize that the theater itself doesn't get a dime of that money, and all the money comes from concessions. So then I buy my $5 pop, and I'm just thinking, well, this is what I pay for the experience, and it's probably not worth $20-some, but what else can I do?
At least in the States, the way it works is the longer the film runs, the more percentage the theater gets of the box office take.
That's good.
So, you have a film that runs like, say, 2 months, they may get all of that. Money goes directly to the theater itself. And that's a problem with the current climate in movies is, when are you ever going to have something that runs longer than a month if it's not a, Avengers movie?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very rarely. I know, like, Black Panther's still on around here. I guess it's still doing okay. But
I've got a couple of big theaters outside the city, and they have so many screens that they still show stuff that's super old. I never really get out there much because it's kind of far away and stuff. But yeah, I know they got Black Panther and several other things that I've more or less forgotten about, and they're still playing there, which is kind of funny. Actually, let's see what's there right now.
Yeah, I was just kind of blown away. I was like, man, so there's like 3 Marvel movies on at the same time.
Yeah. What really sucks is, the close one, the Oxford, is finally closed, and that was the one that always showed like the festival movies and stuff like that. Speaking of which, we were talking about Lars von Trier's latest film, The House That Jack Built, which looks so, looks really edgy and stuff, and has already gotten a big response at the Cannes Film Festival, people walking out and being disgusted by it and stuff like that. And I wonder, like, back in the day, my Oxford theater would definitely have carried that. Now I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to see that in the theater, and that makes me upset.
Yeah, they may not get a release at all.
Well, let me just switch theaters here really quickly.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's Andrei Tarkovsky, great Soviet filmmaker. Certainly not the only one. There were a few other guys. Um, there's a few other guys there too. I can't think of their names now. Oh damn! I had actually a couple of them written down. Now Sergei Bondarchuk, Sergei Eisenstein, Andrei Kolchowski, and Nikita Milikov. They're all very well known. I know at least one of those. I saw one of their movies. I can't remember what, but Tarkovsky's still probably the most well known and stuff. And yeah, so that was Stalker with a little bit of stuff on Mirror and stuff too. It was definitely worth delving into some of his other works. Which I found it really rewarding. I really enjoy his work, really enjoy his style, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of his other stuff and rewatching Solaris, which was always a movie I really liked. Well, at the time, I only really viewed it in the context of a sci-fi film. Now, having seen his other stuff, I can, see some of the other aspects that it has too that are really cool. As I said, Stalker actually seems kind of like a continuation of some of the themes that are brought up in Solaris, which is kind of neat. It might be neat to watch back to back or in a short amount of time. So, as we said, since we're a little out of sorts here in our comeback, a few days late and stuff, we're not entirely sure what next week is going to be, but definitely something for next week. Again, I'm thinking maybe Kubrick, but that's not 100%. Jay and I will talk about it, but expect something for Tuesday, and we'll let you know as soon as we can on the Twitter. So stay tuned to that. Thanks a lot, guys. So that's going to do it, and thanks very much, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.